All right, it says I am live, but I'm not seeing anything up top there, so let me figure out why it's not. There we go. All right, welcome to the Arcade Heroes Year in Review 2014 or 2024. I don't know where I was getting 2014 from. Let me see about adjusting my screen. There we go. So my name is Adam. I'm with ArcadeHeroes.com, and if you're new to the arcade business, happy to guide you through stuff. Hi, how's it going? Good. Looking to play some pinball? Okay.
How do you play?
What's that?
How do you pay to play?
You just need tokens. They're 25 cents each. You can use cash or card to buy them, and I can turn on all the pins, so no, not a problem. How much you want to do?
Let's do $5.
Okay. There's your card. You pick a receipt if you need one. Okay, here you go. I'll go get those fired up for you. Right back. All right. So if you're new to the channel, the sites, and all that, again, my name's Adam. I actually run a real arcade. That's where I'm at right now. It's called Arcade Galactic. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so because business is open, that's where I might need to go and handle certain things during the stream. But otherwise, we'll look at the news and things that happened in the arcade business last year. And yes, there is an arcade business still. A lot of people still have the impression that it was just a thing of the 80s and the 90s and then just died off and went away. Actually, never did fully disappear. It was something that's been around. It's obviously changed a lot and diminished to some degree over where it had been in, say, 1982. But just because it's not doing the same sort of numbers as you saw in 1982, it doesn't mean that it's dead or anything. This is an industry that's far more vibrant than some other industries I can think of, such as the movie rental industry. I haven't seen a Blockbuster video. In fact, I think the last one that had been subject of documentaries and a lot of social media attention in Bend, Oregon, might have closed. But yeah, if you are new here, I'm happy to explain a couple of things for some context at first. And feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll see what we can do to help along those lines. But as I was just saying, the arcade industry is alive and thriving to a pretty strong degree. Right before the pandemic happened, and that obviously slammed some brakes on developments. Eugene Jarvis, the creator of games like Defender and Robotron 2084, NARC, Cruisin' USA, who's the CEO of what I would say is the number one arcade game maker of the modern times, Raw Thrills. He had told me that he felt like the arcade industry had gotten back to where it was in the mid-90s. And of course, the mid-90s was the time of one-on-one fighters, whether it's Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat, but also sports games like NBA Jam, like-on games like Area 51, racing games like Daytona USA, and San Francisco Rush. And so, yes, it's there still is an industry there. And as we go through what happened in 2024 for the arcade industry, and I hope that'll also get the point across. But again, any questions, throw them in chat there. I'm using StreamYard instead of OBS this time, and hopefully everything's good with the stream. If there's any problems with the audio or the video, whatever it may be, just let me know and I'll see what I can do. But StreamYard seems to work a little better in some ways than OBS does. So over on arcadeheroes.com, which is the blog, and I need to move this thing so my hat keeps hitting this here. We have our post of the year in review 2024, going over business, new games, history, and such. Nice to see you too, Random Access Gamer. And let me navigate over here. Let's zoom in a little bit so that way certain text might show up a little better. But oh yeah, by the way, this is also streaming to X and LinkedIn. That's another reason why I wanted to try StreamYard, was because it's easy to stream to multiple services. I'm sure there is a way on OBS too, but I've just had a lot of problems in streaming to OBS. As the last stream that I did, the IAPA stream, I had to redo that like 3 or 4 times, which was kind of frustrating. So, but yeah, the quality's slightly lower, but it's there. I guess that's still good. But arcadeheroes.com has been in existence for now 18 years, which makes me feel really old. Now, I did not found the website. It was founded by somebody within the industry who wishes to remain anonymous. But they had started the site and they got some writers on board. I joined soon afterwards. I discovered the site after it broke its first major story, which was about a trade show in England called ATEI. It was ATEI 2007, as I recall. And then I started writing for the site in April of 2007. Been writing ever since, but the person who founded the site gave me the ownership of the site in 2010. And so been my side, I guess, since then. But not the only writer there. There are some other writers, but there have been changes in that over the years. But this past year definitely had a lot of help, and I'm very appreciative of that. If he wants to be named, I can name you, but if not, that's fine too. But for the site itself, yeah, I've been around for 18 years, and most of our growth on social media has been on YouTube. I do try and get pretty much every social media site. There's probably some that I missed. You can even see here we have our social media channels. I don't update Instagram very much. I kind of never really cared for that, because I guess the point of most social media to me when you're running a website is to get people to visit your website, and Instagram doesn't really let you share hyperlinks, and so it's kind of pointless there. It's more for sharing photos and such. But so yeah, I don't use it that often, if at all. I think we'll come back to business talk a little bit later. Let's jump way down to the top stories of the year, the top 10 posts and videos of the site. Now, videos is an interesting stat to look at, I think, just because it kind of shows you what people are looking for. When it comes to the stats of the site, 1 second here. Hi.
Hey.
How's it going again?
Good. How about you?
Good. What can I do for you today?
Can I get $8 worth of tokens?
Sure. Go ahead. All right. There's 4 and 8.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. I thought it was going to be slower today because school got started, but it's actually just as busy as it was yesterday. So, oh well, we'll roll with it. I guess just so anybody's aware who's new, again, I run an arcade in Salt Lake City, Utah, and one of those things that I decide to do, which sometimes is detrimental. There's people that get upset and leave bad reviews about my business because what I will do in the mornings is I generally won't turn everything on. I will only turn things on when people come in and ask to play certain things, and it's because sometimes I can go for a few hours because I'm inside of a mall and I have to be open when they say I have to be open. And generally speaking, arcades don't see a lot of action in the mornings. It's usually a nighttime thing. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to that, like today. I was assuming that today was just going to be dead. But we got a couple of guys that are in for pinball, which is nice. When I look at my pinball earnings from last year, though, it's like the hype that's out there about pinball does not match what it makes on site at location. Now, I know I'm just one out of thousands and thousands of locations out there. But still, it's just one of those things that doesn't seem to always match up like it should. But yeah, so that's where I might have to pause sometimes, maybe go turn things on if somebody's wanting to do something. And you also, I don't know if the sound from the games is bleeding in. Which is also annoying because it'll probably get dinged by certain sites like YouTube saying we're violating copyright because there's sounds that are licensed or whatever, which is stupid, but whatever. Anyways, these were the most watched videos. The most of which that was watched was the quest to defeat the Obsidian monstrosity from Minecraft Dungeons Arcade. And I still occasionally see comments from people asking, how do you capture arcade games? Now, on older ones, sure, it would be a little bit more of an involved process, especially if you're trying to do it from real hardware and converting that old, like 15 hertz RGB signal straight over. But brand new arcade games don't do that. They don't work on JAMA boards. They work on PCs, and usually mid-range PCs, and so they'll have either DVI or HDMI out. I mean, DVI is just a little bit of an annoyance just because you have to use some adapters and it's not out. It's usually not the type of DVI that's outputting audio. It's the audio is output through the sound card instead, and so you have to use a separate audio line. But it's not really that hard to capture. So all that stuff there, the Minecraft Dungeons, Walking Dead, Cruise and Blast, and it looks like that. Yeah, that's mostly what fits there. That's what it is. That's all I have to do is simply do that. Sorry, I'm just changing some of my Windows stuff here so I can see both things at the same time. All right. Now, for the top 10 stories that I'm going to get to first, our 10th one was the EAG 2024 recap, which was new arcade games for Europe. If we go there, is the pinball sounds coming through to you guys or not? Just curious because somebody's playing Guardians of the Galaxy now. But EAG is a trade show that happens in January in London, and it's kind of a smaller show compared to one called IAAPA. So again, if you're new, IAAPA is a giant trade show that focuses on the arcade, amusement industry, theme park industry. Happens every November, generally in Orlando, Florida. It's coming through pretty loud. That's kind of why I was hoping today would be lower. So this is probably going to get me dinged on YouTube for monetization because it's playing a song that they're supposed to be licensed. Because I'm sure those artists, some of which are probably dead now, need that 5 cents or whatever. Thanks, Ted. I'm not sure if there's a way I can adjust this. Now that I think about it, it's like I wish I would have gone and adjusted the volume on my pinball machines to bring them down a little bit. I'll do the best I can and talk straight into the microphone. But so yeah, Bandai Namco Amusement Europe, they are a company, obviously, they're a division of Bandai Namco. They're the Amusement Europe, and there's Amusement Europe, there's Amusement America. They focus on different things that handle arcade machines within their respective territories. Now, the Amusement Europe division, they are a distributor not just a manufacturer. And so they represent a lot of different lines that are. Sorry, this is so distracting. It kind of ticks me off now that I decided to do it now. I guess I should have done it tomorrow. But so they handle different companies over in Europe. And so you'll see products that are not Bandai Namco labeled, such as Adrenaline Amusements, Raw Thrills games, a couple of other lines that are sold into Europe. Now, this oftentimes creates a little bit of confusion because you'll see Bandai Namco Amusements Europe promoting games that are not Namco stuff. And sometimes we're like, why are they doing that? Again, it's because they're selling the machines to arcade or other out-of-home entertainment venues that exist across Europe, and I also believe they cover the Middle East as well. And so when there's a trade show like EAG, which again is kind of like if you didn't get a chance to go to IAAPA here in the United States, you get to see products there. And sometimes there are some brand new products that debut at EAG that were not at IAAPA. Just depends. And like one of them that's on the screen here is Draken's Realm Keepers. That this did debut first in the United States, but it used a different type of screen. It used a micro LED panel that was shaped like a square, as opposed to this 16 by 9, 85-inch screen. This version does exist in the United States, but I haven't seen any on location yet. I know it's an option, so if you don't want to deal with the LED stuff, then you can just worry about that there. Or it's easier to deal with, I think. They're probably cheaper. We also have to tip our hat to Toby over in the UK, who sent some photos. And there's another thing to mention too. EAG is happening, I believe it's next week, correct me if I'm wrong, but the EAG 2025 is going to be taking place next week. So I believe Ted will be there at least for one day as far as getting some coverage there, and Toby also probably will be there too. And so we'll get as much information as we can to share that with you guys so that you can see what's happening over in Europe when it comes to stuff like that. This was also when we first heard about Animal Kaiser Plus. Next week from Tuesday. Okay. Animal Kaiser Plus, The King of Animals, which is a very popular game over in the UK back in the early 2010s, was getting a re-release. I got to play this at another trade show a couple of months later. And this is available worldwide, or at least throughout the West, both in Europe and North America. Don't know how well it's been doing, but if you're not familiar with Animal Kaiser, it's a kid's game where it would vend these different cards, and you can collect the cards and battle them against animals against each other as mutations, stuff like that. I've actually thought about getting one for my own location just because I needed a few more things that would fall under the Kidtainment label. And I've had one game that was designed for kids, and it did really, really well. Unfortunately, the thing broke down, like both monitors died, not the power supply, but like where you plug in the power blew up or something. So I was like, that's great. But still, this one would probably be a little bit more reliable than that one game that I had. So again, it's something I've thought about. Godzilla Kaiju Wars VR. This was the European debut of that game. And now I have had some people asking me about this. If you're not familiar with this one, this is by Raw Thrills. It was first shown at IAAPA 2023. And then again, this was the European debut of the game. It came out, I believe it was April 2024. And the VR game, kind of like Jurassic Park, where you have the mounted guns to shoot at things, but you use VR to see things. Now, of course, if you were standing by, you could see what was going on the two different screens, each screen showing what one of the viewers was seeing. But this was only released with 2 chapters out of 5 or levels. Now, at IAAPA 2024, all 5 levels were available, and I have videos of that on my YouTube channel. But it's still I'm not sure when those are going to be out. So I apologize for those who have been asking. It's like, when are those levels coming? When are those levels coming? It's like, until Raw Thrills says something, I can't. I don't speak for them. Hi. So it'll be out when it's out, whenever they decide. But that is one thing. If you're new to this industry, developers don't like to announce things usually. A lot of times we find that something is in production when it's already shipped out to some places. I would prefer it if there would be a little bit more preparation that goes on. Like Raw Thrills is usually pretty good about announcing stuff in advance. But there's a lot of companies in this industry where they'll literally wait until after the thing's already shipped out before they'll tell anybody about it. Now, sometimes I find out beforehand, but it just depends. But yeah, so should be soon, should be any time that the new levels for this will be available, and then the game will be complete. Let's see, what else did Bandai Namco have? These titles here, MotoGP VR. So Raw Thrills is really the only, I shouldn't say the only company, them and Sega are the only ones that are really pushing VR kind of hard on the market right now. I have my opinions about that. You guys can let me know what you think, but I've noticed that as I posted stuff about VR on the site, it doesn't seem to get a lot of traction. It varies. Now, of course, I am wearing a hat right now that I got from a now defunct VR company. They got sold off to somebody else. Hey, it still works as a hat. Here is the most expensive arcade machine, or one of the most expensive arcade machines ever created. It's not VR. It's actually a 100-inch 4K screen. I think it's a short throw projector, but it uses light guns. It uses D-Box motion seats. It's called Super Blaster. It's a variation of another game that also is around the same price. I think Super Blaster might be slightly cheaper. This game is by Triotech, and what I heard is that this game costs around $100,000. And so it's like, yeah, that's a lot of money. Now, I've heard that places, sorry, I keep getting ahead of myself. There's a term in this business called FEC. It stands for Family Entertainment Center. So think Dave & Buster's, Chuck E. Cheese's, Round One USA. Generally, whatever you would consider to be a miniature indoor theme park is essentially what you would call an FEC. Usually, FECs have something like a giant arcade room on their premises. Now, there are some other things which may not be very focused on arcades at all, say like trampoline parks, which could also be considered FECs. Although most trampoline parks I know of do have a little arcade area. But yeah, so this sort of game at that sort of price tag is made for your high-end FECs. And yeah, when I heard that price too, I was like, wow, that's really cool. If I was Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, it'd be great, But again, there are some FECs that do have the money. And from what Triotech told me, that where they tested it out, there were a couple locations where it paid itself off in a few months. So, as an indicator of what the health of the arcade business is, if a $100,000 game can pay itself off in a few months, that means that there are people going and visiting an arcade and putting money into it. So, if that's what a dead industry is, then okay. But it is something that I would never ever get for my own facility because I would have to sell most of my game room, I think, to be able to afford one, and then I don't think it would do anything much better than what my Jurassic Park arcade does. It would take years and years and years to pay itself off. But yeah, if you are wandering around out there visiting FECs and you come across this, you can check it out. I mean, the graphics on this are top-notch. They use Unreal Engine 5. It's at 4K, 60 frames a second, 100-inch screen. It has more than one game on it, which does get a little confusing as far as the name Super Blaster or Cube. But There's at least 3 games, possibly 5. I can't remember now. But what part of the reason why this thing is so expensive is because this actually takes something called the XD Dark Ride or Dark Theater and minimizes it into an arcade machine. Now, if you've ever come across an XD Dark Ride, those things are usually 8 players, and they're like a little miniature movie theater, but they're interactive. And they use light guns just like this does. They use moving seats. Also, I forgot to mention, as you can see on the picture here, they have fans on them to simulate wind effects. And so, but an XD Dark Ride starts at $250,000. And so this at 4 seats instead of 8. And yes, it's not quite as large. It doesn't have curtains behind it or anything, but still, when you look at it from that lens, it's a bargain. But still, if you're a poor arcade operator like myself and running a small arcade, it's like, yeah, that never even enters my mind as far as something that I would put up there. But again, FECs need content. They like content that they can offer that you can't get at home. I mean, that's what I like too. But where they also have the budget to afford things like that, which are almost like attractions, as we call them, where it's something that drives people to visit. So like usually an attraction would be something like laser tag or bowling or bumper cars, something like that. And so games like this help kind of bridge the gap between just an arcade amusement and attractions, if that makes any sense. Let's see. This was also the debut of Pulp Fiction Pinball to Europe, which was also designed by Play Mechanics, who is a subsidiary of Raw Thrills. That is run by George Petro. If you're not familiar with that name, you're probably familiar with his work. He designed games like Revolution X and Terminator 2, Judgment Day for Midway. We worked on several other games at Midway, and if you read NBA Jam, the book, which gets into the history of NBA Jam, he's quoted in it quite a bit because he was there with Mark Turnell. In fact, it was kind of George Petro's statement that got Mark thinking about creating a basketball arcade game. So George is kind of the grandfather of NBA Jam. But anyways, that studio, this is their first pinball machine based on Pulp Fiction. It is a simpler design compared to other types of designs, but it's still cool. Let's see, Death Leisure had this super speed simulator. This is one thing you'll see more at EAG than maybe some other trade shows, or some Chinese games. Sometimes, it's like I've never seen this one in the States. I don't know if any of you over there in Europe have seen this one out on location or not. And these have been more popular too. These giant sniper rifle games, and there's several of them out on the market now that are trying to essentially be a new silent scope, but they're sometimes just taking a console game that few have heard of, throwing it into an arcade machine, giving it really cool hardware, but not necessarily changing the game to fit with what an arcade needs to do. But still, the guns are really cool. Electrocoin, they're a distributor out of the UK, and they show or they have the license to carry DDR in Europe. And so somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the most recent version that they still offer, A20 Plus. I know that's not the latest version of DDR that's out there, but it's still better than nothing. Now, off on a tangent here really quick, IAPA 2024, that giant trade show, which I like to call the E3 of the arcade industry, or the Super Bowl of the arcade industry, Konami was there, and they were talking to several different people, and it looked like they were trying to get back into the American market. I don't know what is going to come out of that, because I haven't heard anything, but it's a possibility. We could maybe see some official representation of DDR in the United States again, which would be nice, because the way that it's currently been set up is there's no official representation. You have to import one, and I think that means that you can't use the Konami network online features, which has become a major part of DDR. That I have to admit, I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but still would be nice. But yeah, if you're over in Europe, particularly the UK, then this is where you would get your DDR fix. Or if you're running an arcade location there, that's where you can get DDR from officially for some official European support. They also have this light gun game called Skill Shooter, which uses a realistic pistol. It's like an actual metal casing, not a plastic one. Has some realistic feedback. This exists in the United States as Quick Shot, although I believe the software is also slightly different, but a similar concept exists. And so, yeah, we'll also see EAG 2025, what it is, the latest that Electropoint is going to offer. As Ted's mentioning in the YouTube chat, it could be a surprise. Be interesting to see that if the relationship between Konami and Electropoint results in seeing a new Contra Burst game. We'll get into that a little later. We'll have to wait and see. And Electropoint is also the official source of Stern Pinball into Europe. And so if you want to see, like it was just announced, Dungeons & Dragons Eye of the Tyrant by Stern Pinball, and that's the first official game release, arcade game release of 2025. That should be there. I know it's at CES in Las Vegas right now. But that should be the European debut of D&D pinball, although technically it's the second pinball to carry the D&D name, in case you're into pinball at all. JNC Sales, I'm not super familiar with them. They're another distributor that is in Europe, but they tend to carry Chinese-made games, particularly from a developer called Nito Game, and it's kind of hard to find out a lot of information about these other than what GNC releases. I don't know how common it is to find these games out there, but they had a Zombie Crisis game, which was kind of like House of the Dead 4 in a way, not entirely though. And then Weapon, I actually forgot this one existed, so I don't know if any viewers watching this from the UK have seen this one and can describe it in more detail. I mean, from the looks of it, it looks like a kind of a typical light gun shooting game, and pretty decent price. Again, if anybody new out there is watching this, pricing on arcade machines can be sometimes astounding, like we already talked about a game that's at $100,000. One thing I should have said is that's not the norm. Right now, the average cost of an arcade machine, I would probably place it at $14,000. Zombies Crisis is not very good. I like the cabinet more than I like the game. The game is just very forgettable. But I guess it's a decent effort, but I don't know. I would only get it if I got it really, really cheap. But before the pandemic happened, the average game price was probably around $7,500. And so everything doubled after that with all the inflation and the shipping problems that have existed over the past few years since then. It's still something that hasn't completely leveled itself out. Now, I am starting to see some indications that we might start seeing some pricing come down, particularly from some indie games there's one I'll talk about later. But this is one place where Chinese game developers are able to compete better than, say, American or Japanese ones, is they're able to hit in with low prices. But as the axiom goes, you get what you pay for. And so is anybody going to be writing about Weapon 25 years from now? Probably not. I mean, Zombie Crisis might come up on a video here in 20 years, just as this is a weird thing. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. So, yeah, let's see. And same with Lucky Pong Challenge, which is, this has been a kind of a trend since about 2015 or so. Once in a while, we get this beer pong type arcade game that pops up, and it's just literally beer pong, just arcadeified, so you can do that. I guess maybe what I'm going to do here really quick is go over to my Guardians of the Galaxy machine and lower the volume a little bit just for this so that we don't get this bleeding.
The truck changes your path. We still need your help.
Okay. Hello 4J Grizzly. Just a little bit. Right now, we're going through the year 2024 on the arcade industry. Right now, I'm tackling EAG 2024 and some of the stuff that popped up there. Perhaps I should get it a little speedier because I was really going through the top 10 stories, but I let this sidetrack me. But we had Sega Amusements at EAG 2024, and as I recall, the main thing that they were showing off was the new Apex Rebels Racer. If any of you out there have played Apex Rebels, what did you think about it? I did like how this one does capture more of that Sega arcade racer feel from the 90s. I mean, maybe not completely, but I still, every time I've played it, I've enjoyed it. And it takes, some practice to get good at it. It's not one of those racers where you just sit down and it races for you, which I don't personally like those very much. I mean, they can still be fun for quick gaming, but it's not something that I go back to over and over again. See you later, Random Access Gamer. Catch the stream later. And so one thing about Apex Rebels, this was released in February, as I recall, but at the IAPA 2023 trade show where it debuted in EAG 2024, which you see right here, it was missing one level, the Motorland Sakura, which is actually a harder level. But I did get some footage of that at IAPA 2024, so that way you could see that in action finally. Although this would be a good one for me to get some direct capture footage of at some point. Just haven't had the opportunity. Yeah.
Sorry, can I get $4 worth of tokens?
Sure, not a problem. Go ahead. Here you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, one thing I do like about, there's a few things I like about Apex Rebels. The graphics are really good. The sound is really good. That was one of the things that really caught my ears, so to speak, was the sounds in this, because not just the sound system, but some of the sound effects stood out to me more than some other games do. And the screens are huge. And I have seen this one out there when I was in Florida for IAPA 2024. I visited a couple arcades in Orlando, and one of them there underneath the giant Ferris wheel there on off of iDrive actually had a pair of these. Let's see. Asphalt 9 Legends VR, which has been out there for a little while. Another one of those VR games. I'm not sure how well that's been doing compared to the regular Asphalt 9 Legends arcade machine. I assume it'd be doing all right. Hypercross, which was a game that also debuted at IAPA 2023. Here's one of those very rare occasions where Europe gets a game before the United States does, and that is Wave Riders Extreme. And sorry, I should have mentioned it first. This is at the UDC booth. They are another major distributor out of the UK. And they do tend to get these games out of China from a company called Ace Amusement. And Ace Amusement really has been stepping up their game. I mean, they're not quite there yet. I wouldn't say they're a Sega or a Konami or a Taito at this point, but they're getting there a lot more than some other companies that I've seen come out of China. And so if they continue improving their quality and polishing their games and understanding Western game design, then they could be one of those names at some point. But on that road to get there, you have games like the Wild Thing Wipeouts, you have Wave Riders Extreme, which of course is like a jet skiing racing game. But again, Europe got this one first, and it didn't debut. Actually, I don't think it's even still officially available yet here in the United States. It's coming here through Coastal Amusements, and from what they told me, it'll be shipping out this spring. So we'll see. And this is a game that I got to also play here. This is another one that Europe got first, Super Drill, also by Ace Amusement. I got to play it at IAPA 2024, and this one is actually supposed to be available this week. through Amusement Source International, and I was pleasantly surprised with this game. It's a drilling game where you're always moving, your drill's always moving in a forward direction, and you use this giant joystick to move it around. Now, one oddity or one difference between the European version and the American version is that here you can see these giant joysticks, ball tops. Those don't exist in the version that I played at IAPA. Instead, that entire platform is a joystick. That entire drill-looking thing is a joystick. And so it still works out. It took a little bit of practice to get right. But this is one of those games where it's like if I was able to consult on it and help design it, I would give it there's some certain things I give polish to. Because it has these cute little characters and stuff, but it just kind of jumps in and whatnot. It's like you could do a quick cutscene or two to give it a little bit more personality. But again, I was pleasantly surprised by how fun it was. Then we had Step Maniacs in the deluxe version. Later on, we'll talk about a new version of that. And then you also had Eunice showing off their Bigfoot Mayhem game, which was a Bigfoot driving arcade game with 2 screens like Rothrills' Fast and Furious arcade. And some more pinball, including Labyrinth Pinball, which had come out, I can't remember I think that was 2023 when that launched. But that covers EAG. That was a very long tangent there, so maybe I'll avoid doing that for these other ones for now. Let's just get through the top 10 stories, maybe focus on the top 3 like that, and then we'll go back to trade shows. But the 9th most viewed story on ArcadeHeroes.com is AAA 2024 Day 1, which is a giant trade show in China. Number 8 was new details on Bandai Namco's Animal Kaiser Plus. 7 was Dave & Buster's to launch their Store of the Future format in Dallas back in February. I don't know how that panned out, especially given the recent troubles we've heard of from Dave & Buster's, where their CEO resigned, and I guess he's been being investigated for something. I can't remember the full details on that. But yeah, yes, China is definitely making some major moves, and we're going to see that continuing into 2025. That's going to be a big trend. You do have more companies like Amusement Source International, which are importing their games to the United States, or North America, I should say. Pretty much anything that's available in the U.S. should be available in Canada, and I think Mexico. But I know Mexico has some laws that make it a bit difficult for imports at times. I remember talking with somebody once where they had to ship the coin mechanisms separately or something to Mexican customs because they had to take it apart and make sure it was approved or something silly like that. I mean, aside from just also economic differences there that might result in fewer locations being open or making new game purchases and such. But yeah, Chinese developers are definitely making inroads, and it also helps where they have cheaper prices to go off of compared to your other Western developers or even Eastern ones. Number 6 was the Spirit of NBA Jam returns with NBA Superstars. I'm actually surprised that wasn't higher on the list, just because it seemed to get a lot of traction out there. It's like NBA Jam is back in arcades, even though it's not NBA Jam 2. But still, it's been a long time since we'd had a video basketball game in the arcade business. I think it was NBA Showtime might have been the last time that was seriously tackled. We'll get into that later. Raw Thrills launches Hero Card Series 3 update for Minecraft Dungeons Arcade was number 5. Taiko no Tatsujin USA version release details was number 4. That one was kind of a surprise. That was another one of those things where there wasn't like a press release and a big media thing. It was just, I went to IAPA, that giant trade show, and they had Taiko no Tatsujin there, and I was asking Namco, I was like, oh yeah, it started shipping like last week. It's like, oh, okay. Would have been nice to have had a press release or something out there to know about that instead of just making sure I showed up to a trade show and asked. Number 3 was Jitsu Squad featuring Samurai Pizza Cats unveiled at Amusement Expo 2024. And I honestly do not remember the Samurai Pizza Cats. It was not something that I grew up with. It was one of those things that I missed when I was a kid. I mean, I watched Saturday morning cartoons and all sorts of cartoons back in the day, but that was just one of those short-lived ones that I missed. I was busy watching Ninja Turtles. Yeah, that one, I guess we'll get into that a little bit later. It debuted at Amusement Expo 2024, but it wasn't released until last month. And so, yeah. And then My DX by Sega placed on test in the USA. So that got a lot of attention, given that it showed up at round one and was also kind of just out of nowhere. From what I recall, and somebody can correct me in chat if I'm wrong about this, but this is being handled by Sega Japan, not by Sega Amusements International, which is generally thought of as the Western division. There's kind of a long history there, and it becomes a little bit confusing as to which Sega is which. I think most Sega fans consider Sega Japan to be the Sega, but Sega Amusements International still does have people that have been around in the arcade industry for a very long time. But again, still a little strange what's going on with that one and who's really running it. Because there was news this week of another one showing up at a non-Dave & Buster's, non-Round 1 USA location, Velocity something, I can't remember. That is also getting some attention. And then our number one red story for 2024 was when the announcement that Taiko no Tatsujin was launching to North America in November. So it's kind of funny that got more attention than the actual release. But again, I guess the one problem with the release news is that it came out during IAPA, and there's so much news that comes out in arcades about that time that it's easy for stuff to get lost. Yeah, like Sega Japan used to handle a lot more stuff for the industry or for arcade releases that were particularly Japanese focused, and then you get the localization here than they used to. But it's a weird situation. But yeah, so those were the top 10 stories and videos. And so thanks to everybody for their support on that. Another thing that is always getting a lot of attention to the site is not so much news, but arcade history. And so one thing that was also brought up was that so right before IAPA happened in November last year, there was the Japan Amusement Expo. I almost said Japanese Amusement Expo. Used to be known as JPO. Now, not a lot of people are very happy that the organizers of this event moved it to right before IAPA, particularly for any manufacturers like X Arcadia and I think Konami and Taito guys, where they had to do stuff at this event and then literally hop on a plane as soon as it was done and fly over to Orlando, which is like a 22-hour flight or something. And so, but anyways, at the Japan Amusement Expo, Sega had this little museum section and setting up some old games like Daytona USA, House of the Dead, and some other games, focusing a little bit more on their arcade history than they usually do. Oftentimes at these trade shows, there's no old games at all. There's no museum sections. And so it was interesting to see that popping up. But I really do think that with the age of where people are at, where people who were kids or teenagers back in the 80s, we're all old guys now, old ladies too. And there's a lot of nostalgia there that still keeps hitting for certain things. And so that always seems to draw a lot of attention. And I believe our most read story on the website ever was when I did a thing on the 40 years of arcade games. And I literally covered 40 years worth of arcade releases, trying to hit all the major stuff from 1972 all the way up to, what was that? Thank you. No problem. All the way up to, was that 2012, I think, at that point. And so, yeah, but there were some other history things that we covered, such as celebrating 26 years of Sega's Naomi. Yeah, I know it should have been 25, but there are some times where something pops up and you're like, oh, I wasn't ready for that. And I didn't think about doing a story on that until it was too late. Or Happy National Video Arcade Day 2024. Now, this is something that I kind of just self-declared. I don't know who invents what a holiday is, other than the president of a country is usually what makes that. But there's these organizations that always come up with all these things like National Donut Day or National Mirror Day or whatever it is. And so it's like if people can just come up with their own holidays on a whim, might as well have the arcade site make up National Video Arcade Day. But I base mine at least on a date. I believe is June 27th, which is the day that Atari was founded. By the way, we shouldn't have pinball bleeding over anymore, but I'm sure all those sounds and stuff are going to ding this, so I won't be making any money off of this live stream. House of Dead franchise, yeah, it's still popular. I don't know that it's as popular as it used to be. So for my earnings, I guess if we change the subject really quick to what business was like last year, which I do talk about a little bit. Like I've talked about this on the channel. I talk about it on the blog sometimes. And it's somewhat popular because people are curious to know what it's like to run an arcade in a modern day, and so that's what I try and share. And I'm more willing to share a lot more information than a lot of other arcade operators out there. I found it frustrating many times, especially when I was researching the industry, as to just getting numbers. A lot of people in this business protect their numbers more than the nuclear codes are protected and stuff like that. And it's so frustrating just to get some honest answers sometimes about how business does. To the, gosh, I'm almost forgetting now what I was just bringing up there. It slipped my mind as to how things were doing. But yeah, so like last year, it wasn't a great year. And I had noticed this around November 2023, where for some bizarre reason that I still don't fully understand, November 2023 was one of the worst months I had ever seen in doing a business. And I have been doing this arcade business since 2008, the summer 2008. I opened literally a month before the American economy crashed. And I was able to survive through that. I was able to survive through 2020 as well. But for some bizarre reason in November 2023, just business was horrible. And I had never seen a November perform anywhere in the bottom, like 6 months or 8 months of the year. It's usually one of your top years, at least for me. Now, every arcade's a little bit different as to what business they see throughout the year. There are certain places that are maybe more tourist focused, and so if tourism is high at a particular season of the year, that's when they'll be busy, and then the rest of the year they might be slow. But at least for my business around the holidays, because again, I'm in a mall, usually because of all the sales that are going on after Thanksgiving, and also just some other things, people traveling and such, in November it usually is a very good month. But November 2023 wasn't, and that kind of set the stage for most of 2024 as well. And I was getting phone calls from other operators, and they were asking me, it's like, how's your business going? And then when I would tell them, there's like, yeah, I'm seeing the exact same thing. And with one exception, all the operators I talked to said that their business was down anywhere between 15 to 25% compared to the year prior. And 2023, as mentioned, also wasn't the greatest year either. And I had noticed some trends going down throughout 2023 compared to 2022. And so, yeah, there was definitely a bounce back from when you had lockdowns and stuff from 2020 and to some extent in 2021, depending on where you were at. Where I was at here in Utah, I was actually reopened in 2020 itself. And of course, I did have some pretty poor months along that time. But it definitely, I could see the retraction and how, I guess people got out and were spending again, but then they started pulling back. And so 2024 was a very, very uneven year. I didn't have a great summer. Usually I have very good summers. And I got very close to the point of almost needing to start signing off significant amounts of my arcade to keep the doors open, which is a very dangerous place to be in as a small business, because when you have that plus debt, then it can easily equal a death spiral that is very difficult to get out of. Now, fortunately, things started turning around by October, but then this November 2024, had been basically what I normally would have with a November. It wasn't like super exceptional, but I had noticed that business did improve quite a bit. And both November 2024 and December 2024 were actually pretty good. Not any record breakers, but they were still good enough to help me out. And so I'm hoping that other arcade operators had seen a similar effect in their businesses too. And that's one thing that I like to also do as part of Arcade Heroes, is helping out other arcade operators. We have what we call Location Watch, where we cover brand new arcades that open up. And now, in the past, there have been times where we were doing this every single month. I mean, last year I might have been able to do it more. I know definitely when we were looking through December 2024, I was like, I should have done one in November as well, because there was just so many locations. But if you know of any location out there that's a brand new arcade business, or that's opened somewhat recently that maybe we haven't covered before, let us know and we'll include it in the next Location Watch, because I want to spread that good word out there, so to speak, to help other locations get some attention. I mean, I know not everybody on the planet reads Arcade Heroes, but as long as it helps spread a little bit of a word out there as to who's opening and what, then that's good. But I guess really quick back on business. Okay, that's right. You were asking about House of the Dead. House of the Dead had done. Let me see. I got to pull up Discord here, because I had some numbers somewhere about. And so House of the Dead, I have House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn. When I first opened my business in 2008, I had a House of the Dead 4. Had it for several years, but eventually I sold it off. I think it went to an arcade in Malaysia, actually. But it became a headache, because I was replacing the wire harnesses on that over and over again. But I got House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn, which you could call House of the Dead 5 or 5.5 or 6 or whatever. I know there was a House of the Dead EX out there at one point too. But that did $6,285.50 for the entire year. It's actually my sixth highest earning game for 2024. Now, again, keep in mind my numbers are going to be much lower than a lot of other places out there, like Dave & Buster's or Around One USA, and any place that has millions of dollars to build a facility. They're going to be making a lot more money than I am. But as a mall arcade, making $6,200 I think isn't bad. I've had the game since 2020. I actually got it for my second location, which I closed at the end of 2022, and so it's done decently. It actually, last year it made just $100 less, or actually no, not even that. It was like $25 less than The Walking Dead by Raw Thrills. Now, personally, as games go, I think House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn is a better overall game than The Walking Dead. I still like The Walking Dead. I like what they did with that. Wasn't expecting to enjoy the crossbow feature, but that was nice. And of course, The Walking Dead did establish the whole, let's change the lighting, like dynamic lighting for the cabinet, which House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn also uses. But Scarlet Dawn added some better force feedback effects. They also have the wind effects, which are really cool, especially like when the helicopter lands on that first level. But also, I just like the structure of things like House of the Dead with the different paths that you get to take, as opposed to you can start at almost the end of the game sort of thing, like Walking Dead does. But yeah, so House of the Dead still does okay, but The Walking Dead seems to have more of a hold on pop culture, I would say in there. But both of those games did far better than my Luigi's Mansion. My Luigi's Mansion did $4,666. Oh my gosh, 666. But it was my seventh best earning game. But interesting how there was a gap there. Like I had nothing that did $5,000 in the year. And also, in case anybody's curious, my pinballs all sucked. My best earning pinball machine was my Addams Family, which was actually down for about a month and a half. And it made $852 over the course of the entire year. But again, that's a 30-year-old game, and it was my best earning pinball machine. The next closest was Guardians of the Galaxy at $760.50, and then there was Star Trek at $751, Terminator 3, funny enough, at $673, and then Mandalorian at $603. I'm actually trying to sell my Mandalorian pinball. This one thing that I've noticed is the bottom's just fallen out of interest on Star Wars. Anything Star Wars just doesn't do really well. So Luis in chat from LinkedIn mentions that The Walking Dead is still sold. He runs a distributor called Planeta Arcade, and so but I'm not sure what he means by not from Raw Thrills anymore. Now, if anybody's curious, since I'm talking about numbers here, I might as well just tell you what my number one game was. Anybody want to make a guess in chat before I tell you what it is? Drum roll. Let's wait and see if anybody has a guess as to what was the number one game at Arcade Galactic in Salt Lake City, Utah for the year of 2024. And that actually would have been a little bit higher had one of the units not crapped itself right after IAPA. So it was Maximum Tune 5 DX Plus by Bandai Namco Amusements. And so it's interesting in some ways as to how that's a game that doesn't exist on consoles. I think that helps. But also it doesn't follow the normal convention of what should make a racing game work. It's like usually something like Cruise and Blast is what you would think as being the formula that would work. Just simple, straight racing with a lot of rubber banding. But Maximum, I think Maximum 2.5 does have some rubber banding for sure. But yeah, so Maximum Tune 5, it made $11,660.75, which beat out number 2, which was Jurassic Park Arcade by Raw Thrills, released in 2015 at $9,345 straight. And if I'm recalling correctly, my Jurassic Park also was out for a little while in 2024 due to somebody busting one of the guns. Like the people will go on and smash the guns around it without even playing a lot of the time, using it like it was playground equipment. And I guess the stress of it actually broke one of the welds inside of one of the guns. And I tried to get it fixed, but I just couldn't. And I had to replace the entire gun, which sucked. But it is what it is. And then number 3 was Cruise and Blast, and that made $9,085.75. And so again, interesting to me that a more serious, somewhat more simulator style racing game with a stick shifter, far more detailed gameplay. There's a story mode in Maximum Tune 5. There's the online modes. There's a lot more tracks, a lot more cars and stuff. I think because of that, it attracts more of a fan base to it than something like Cruise and Blast does. Now, that isn't to say that Cruise and Blast is a bad game. In fact, my Cruise and Blast paid itself off in 5.5 months, but I've had it since 2017, and so or 2016 actually, I think it was. Yes, so Luis asked on LinkedIn if we still need to pay monthly fees on Maximum Tune 5. Yes, so there's a $75 per seat fee per month. There sometimes are these tournaments nationwide that happen with that. Which right now they've been doing one with Chinese car ghosts, and you can win badges and stuff. I just wish there was something like every month for that. Now, of course, the big question out there everybody's asking is Maximum Tune 7. And so I've heard some rumors. I've heard
from a pretty reliable source that there was a new Maximum Tune, probably 7, that was shown to Japanese operators. I can't remember if it was in 2023. I think it was 2023, where Namco Japan showed that off to them, and they threw a fit because just the price that it was going to be astronomical, like well over $100,000. So from what I know, Dead Heat Unleashed served as kind of a good stopgap on that while they went back to the drawing board on that. So yeah, Forge is asking on YouTube monthly fees for arcade operators. So in Japan, that's actually the norm, where almost every game released over there has a monthly revenue share fee. But that doesn't exist for most games here in the States. There are a couple of exceptions, Maximum Tune 5, which of course is originally a Japanese game, and so it kind of brought that idea over of revenue sharing of a sort. And so the game has to be online, and you have to pay that fee if you want it to work. But most of the games you can buy from Bandai Namco don't come with a fee. And same with other companies. Like, I can't think of a single Sega game that exists right now that requires a fee, at least in the West. Again, it's different if you're in Japan. Raw Thrills, the only game I know of that has the online fee is Big Buck Hunter, but it's also structured in a different way from Maximum Tune. Now, you could say that, I mean, really, Minecraft Dungeons, Injustice Arcade, stuff like that do have a fee, but it's not an online fee, but it's the fee of buying cards, because the game will not work if it's not stocked up with a certain authorized amount of cards. So that's something to, I guess, keep in mind. But yeah, so that's some of those... some of the things that go on with the back end. Now, I'm not an expert on Konami Forge, but from my understanding, pretty much every Konami game does have some kind of fee. I think it's associated with their e-amusement platform. I know they also have Pacelli, but I think that's payment. But again, I guess the problem there is that because those are all imported from Japan, they're using the Japanese network, and so they have to pay the Japanese fees. And so that's where it's different there. But if Konami does actually end up setting up shop again in the West, perhaps they will use a different method, or they'll just find a way for it to work out like that. Okay, so Luis points out on LinkedIn that Sega does have fees with that Dart game. So that's right. They have an augmented reality Dart game. I think it's called 501 Smart Darts that they've started reselling. I mean, technically, Sega's more the distributor for that. To other distributors to sell to operators and such. But darts in general, I think all of those have some kind of fee associated with them. But when you're talking about, say, video games, pinball machines, redemption games, claw machines, coin pushers, stuff like that, usually I'd say 98% of what's out there doesn't have a fee associated with it. So yeah, good question. Let's see. Anything else about business that anybody wants to talk about? And here in this post, I mentioned that it was all over the place throughout 2024. There was one month where I figured out that I was 5% down from 2023, but then there was another month, I think it was July, where it was 23% down from the year prior. And so it was very, very frustrating to try and figure that out. And that's where I did a video on YouTube as well, where I was talking about how do you operate an arcade in a down economy. And fortunately, I figured it out, I guess. But of course, it also depends on different things. Now, one thing going into 2025, like I said, November and December 2024 were good. They were solid months. And January so far, I mean, we're still only 7 days into it, but so far it's actually been pretty good. And January's usually are pretty solid for me. Now, I haven't bought a lot of new equipment in the past couple of years since I closed my second location, because when I opened my second location, I had to accumulate a lot of debt to buy products and fill that location up. Now, I did a lot of consolidating, like the House of Dead Scarlet Dawn that I mentioned. I brought to my original location, my Luigi's Mansion, some of the other stuff that's here in my arcade. I have about 64 games or so, but I haven't really been able to buy anything new. There are some new things, like if you follow my Arcade Galactic social media, you'll see like there was a fantastic prize by Eunice, which is a merchandiser machine that was recently put in, but that's no money off of my back because I work with a local operator where he buys the equipment, he buys the prizes that he puts in there, and he essentially operates that. We do a little split, a revenue share split. And there's also a Skittles vending machine that I got put in here during the week of IAPA. It was installed when I wasn't here. And that one's actually been doing all right so far, I think. I mean, I don't know what their expectations are, but I'm just doing a full split on that where I only make a small percentage. It's like 28% or something, I think. And then the company will maintain it and monitor it and repair it and all that stuff, so I don't have to worry about that. But that's been the only way I've been really able to get new equipment in. Other than like the X Arcadia, I've been able to get a couple of cartridges, and like I was looking this morning, I almost bought it. I didn't yet because I shouldn't. I need to focus on getting my debts paid off, but I almost bought Omen of Sorrow, one-on-one fighting game that looks really nice, and that's been tempting me. Jitsu Squads have been tempting me as well because I have a 4-player X Arcadia cabinet, and I've needed some actual 4-player content for it because I don't have any 4-player games. I used to have Lightning Knights, but I sold that off before I knew I was going to get the 4-player cabinet, and so I kind of regret doing that, but oh well. So yeah, that's business stuff, but also kind of along the lines of business stuff are trade shows, and so I already spent a bit of time talking about EAG, which again, if you're interested in arcade news, if you're over in Europe, then there is another EAG that's going to be happening here very soon over in London, EAG 2025. There's supposed to be a lot of new products there, but I guess the post that I saw about that saying there will be thousands of new products or something like that, that's not going to be thousands of new arcade games. And so, and I'm sure a lot of that stuff's really just repeats from IAPA, but it's new for Europe, so to speak. But again, we will have some people that are there in the UK that will be providing us some front-end coverage on that. And so, yeah, looking forward to seeing that. And then there will be Amusement Expo in March in Las Vegas, middle of March. And so I'm actually aware of some very cool games that are going to be debuting at Amusement Expo from Alan One as well as from X Arcadia. But until there's an official announcement, I can't say anything yet. But definitely stay tuned. If you're interested in what's going on in the arcade world at all, stay tuned for that stuff because there are some cool things that are on their way. But getting back to trade shows from 2024, let's see, we had the AAA and GTI shows out of China. As I mentioned, the AAA show got a lot of attention, and we have to thank August Shi, who is, I think he's still with Sega, but if not, he's been involved with Sega from the 1990s through the 2000s. He's a producer on a lot of different Sega arcade games, including the Ocean Hunters, Jambo Safari. He did Transformers Human Alliance, and I think it was Ghost Squad as well. But he attended, I think it was AAA and GTI, or maybe it was just AAA, but he sent us a lot of photos, and so I'm grateful to him for his coverage on that. There is a very slight, I won't guarantee or promise anything yet, but there is a slight chance that I might actually be able to go to one of these Chinese shows this year. I still need to get my passport figured out, and then got to figure out the costs on that sort of thing. I've never been to China, but be interesting to go and visit myself. So we'll see. Also, X Arcadia, they probably got the most attention that I've seen them ever get because they attended Evo Japan, and that's where they unveiled a lot of new games, a lot of new fighting games. Yes, Dustin, this should be available as VOD later. I'm just hoping, because when I first started, I wasn't expecting it, but literally like 10 seconds after I started the stream, I had a customer come in and he wanted to play pinball, and he played the noisiest pinballs, and I didn't have I wasn't thinking that anybody was going to be in today, and I didn't turn the volume down on them, and so I don't know what's going to happen with certain parts of the early part of this video, at least on YouTube. I mean, I'm also broadcasting on LinkedIn and X, and so we'll see if anything gets dinged there, but I'm sure YouTube will have copyright whining over some of the music that was played on the pinball machines, even though it's mixed with stuff. But Ted was mentioning earlier that the sound quality wasn't the greatest, so perhaps it just got flooded out and it's not recognizable to YouTube's AI. But yeah, you should be able to catch up. So I already spent a lot of time talking about EAG earlier. And then, of course, there was Amusement Expo 2024 in Las Vegas, where we had Asteroids Recharged unveiled by a company called Allen One. And I guess for, what would it be, disclaimer sake, I've been working a lot with them. I don't know if consultancy is the right word or what, but they're based out of Utah where I'm at. And so I've been to their factory. I was able to go and see this Asteroids being built, and they invited me to help put the T-molding on it. It's like, sure, that'd be cool for me to say that I've worked on an arcade machine before. I also proffered some advice and suggestions on the gameplay, and that's something I've been involved with. Alan created this thing called the Brain Trust, where he has a lot of different people from the industry, like Owen Rubin, who used to work at Atari and created a bunch of games. He's part of that.
Hey, again. Can I get $5 worth of tokens?
Sure.
I don't know why, but I love pinball.
Nothing wrong with that.
I get it from my grandpa though.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like pool halls, pinball.
Oh, yeah,
it's
yeah.
just an obsession.
Right. It's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
Easy to come back to. But this brain trust is basically to it's a concept used with Pixar. Pixar had a brain trust where they just had a bunch of people that were experts in different things, and they would get together and meet and bounce ideas off each other and design. It helped them design better films, and so that's kind of what Alan One's trying to do, to design better games. And so I've offered a lot of things. Some of my ideas weren't used, and that's fine. Some of my ideas were used, and I hope it made it a better game. But that debuted at Amusement Expo, and one other surprise that was at Amusement Expo, let's hop over there really quick, was at Raw Thrills' booth. They had debuted 2-player versions of Minecraft Dungeons Arcade, as well as Marvel Contest of Champions, where that latter game had been time locked as an exclusive to Dave & Buster's for 5 years. It's the only game I've ever seen get that sort of exclusive period to it. But now it's available for the rest of the industry to have, nicely in the 2-player model. Bandai Namco Amusements, that's where they had debuted Animal Kaiser Plus. That was really the only new game that they had showed there, I think. See, Sega Amusements also didn't really debut anything new at Amusement Expo. I mean, they had their Zombies Ready Daddy Go Redemption game there, but that had debuted at IAPA. And that's something that is kind of typical with Amusement Expo. Like, if you've been to IAPA, then oftentimes you've seen most of the stuff that's at Amusement Expo, but not always. There's usually some new games, several new games. As I mentioned, both X Arcadia and Allen One are going to have new games at Amusement Expo 2025, and some of them are going to have some significant names attached to them. Of course, again, the reason why I don't want to say what they are yet is because things can always change. Something can happen with a licensor or something, and for some reason it can't be announced officially. And that kind of happened with, there's one game that was at the X Arcadia booth at IAPA where I still haven't been able to publish that yet, make it public because of a licensor issue. And so that's where I guess you got to be careful. LA Games, this is one game they debuted at Amusement Expo, was Smash DX, which was kind of their answer to Eunice's Bigfoot Smash games, where you're driving Jeeps or monster truck-like things, off-road vehicles, and having a race with them. This is also where I met Retro Ralph. We had a good chat there. Perhaps he'll be at Amusement Expo this year, too. That'd be cool to run into him again. Stern Pinball, this is where they debuted to at least the amusement industry, Jaws. And that was the first time I got to play. I mean, Jaws had also been at CES 2024, which, again, as I mentioned, I saw a post saying that Dungeons & Dragons, the new pinball that they just announced, is at CES 2025. American Pinball had debuted their Barrio's Barbecue Challenge, which was based on Barry Orsler, who was a prolific pinball designer, created some games. He created Space Shuttle, which I actually have sitting in the back, broken right now. I need to fix that. But that was credited with kind of changing things for pinball and saving pinball back in the 80s.
Please come in.
This was also the first time I got to see the Galactic Tank Force game, where I made this GIF out of it. And also, it's not on this post, because I think this was part 1. Yeah. But Amusement Source International had debuted Thunder Attack, which they advertised on the site for a while. One thing that I was able to also do is there was a lot more shows I was able to visit last year. I visited California Extreme. Like I visited it in 2018. It's always in San Jose at the Santa Clara Hyatt there in San Jose. But that's where I was able to go check that out. And that was something I was doing with Alan One, as well as the reason why I was able to get over there. And that's where they had shown off Asteroids and their Avian Nights game. But I was also able to check out a lot of other cool things and post several videos from that. I actually still think there's a video I need to do about Atari pinball prototypes, because every single prototype pinball machine that Atari had made that they never released was at that show. I did capture footage of all of them, but I think I had meant to do a video about all of them and kind of get into the history of it. But it's one of those things that slipped through the cracks. There was also the Utah Retro Game Expo, which was set up by a local game store here that I visited and got a little bit of footage of that. Although, admittedly, one of the funnest things that I did at that expo was not arcade related. It was there was a guy who brought 3 old Pentium machines, Pentium 3s, I think, and he set up a Quake LAN. And so I was just constantly going over to the LAN and playing matches against people, and I still got it when it came to Quake. So that was a lot of fun. Also got to go to Pinball Expo for the very first time last year and check out stuff there, and that gave me the chance to check out the new Uncanny X-Men pinball, where Stern had a really awesome cave that they created. It's like, I wish Stern would do stuff like that for these different trade shows that we've been talking about. They generally don't spend a lot of money on those ones compared to events like CES and Pinball Expo. And of course, it makes sense. Pinball Expo's in their backyard. But yeah, so again, videos of all these events are there. I don't know if there's any particular trade show anybody wants me to focus on. IAPA, obviously the biggest one, IAPA 2024. Again, if you're new to the industry, IAPA, it's like the Super Bowl of the arcade industry, or the E3 of the industry, except it still exists, unlike E3. And this year was one of the few rare years where I was there all week long. But even then, I still missed some stuff. That's always frustrating. And so it's like, if I could get the money, I'd love to have somebody come with me and kind of help me film stuff. Although I do have to do a shout out to NSM, as well as Ben Blake, who were both at the show. They're both Arcade Heroes readers. NSM, you can see him playing Taiko no Tatsujin. Well, actually, both him and Ben Blake, you can see playing Taiko no Tatsujin. But there's several other videos where NSM was thankfully willing to work as my model, so to speak. Because I'm sure a lot of you have noticed before, sometimes at trade shows I'm filming somebody and they really suck at the game. And that's kind of the surprising thing that I've learned over the years, is how many people in the arcade industry aren't very good at video games. It varies. Sometimes there are some that are in the business that they're fine at it. But I guess it's a little embarrassing when you're filming this game and maybe it's the only footage that I'll have of said game. But the person just stinks at it. And I mean, there are some videos though where somebody was so bad while I was filming that I just stopped. And then I just wait till later where I can find somebody at least slightly more decent than that. But it was really, really nice for NSM to be there and to help me with filming on some things too. So I really, really, really appreciated that. But out of that show, probably the biggest news, or at least the stuff that got the most attention, were the new games that Bandai Namco Amusements had shown. Now, I guess part of the reason why this also garnered a lot of attention was Bandai Namco has been fairly quiet, not 100% quiet, but a lot more quiet after 2020 than they were before 2020. Now, probably the busiest year that I've experienced Bandai Namco throughout the many years I've been covering this stuff was, I'd say, 2015, 2016, around there. Because that's, when they had the Star Wars Battle Pod, and I guess Dead Heat Riders was 2012, and Mario Kart was 2013. There's Lost Land Adventure, and I'm trying to remember all this stuff. But they used to do a lot more output on certain games. But again, after the pandemic, they just kind of retracted back on a lot of stuff. And yes, they have been doing things here and there, but it just hadn't been as significant as it used to be. But here at IAPA, you not only had the Animal Kaiser Plus that we mentioned earlier, but you had Taika no Tatsujin, which there's a lot of interest on that one, plus Goldstorm Pirates. Now, of course, with Taika no Tatsujin, there was a lot of questions, and I was getting somewhat conflicting information, but again, it seem to have all been sorted out at this point, where that is another one. Forge, you had asked earlier about online fees. Taika no Tatsujin does have a fee. It's 20 cents per song, so that actually fits in with what you kind of see with the Japanese revenue share system. But Goldstorm Pirates, however, does not have an online fee system or any online fee or any online connectivity as far as I know. But Goldstorm capturing a bit of attention just because it's a sequel to a very popular Dead Storm Pirates, which came out in 2009. Somebody did mention, though, that the very first level to this was kind of a repeat of of a level from that first game, which I didn't realize because it had been a very long time since I played Dead Storm Pirates. But I'm pretty sure the other levels in it were all original. But I still find that a little strange why they would essentially remaster a level instead of just creating something completely new. But I know some of the characters are a little different, except for Carl. Carl's still there. And of course the cabinet too is also different. And then this is an interesting trend that I've noticed in a lot of more recent arcade developments, is they've been shying away from the environmental enclosed cabinet. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about there, then this right here, if you can see that. All right, so there's a Luigi's Mansion arcade. That would be an enclosed environmental cabinet. Even has the drapes on there. A lot of locations will pull that off. Over there you can see my house in Scarlet Dawn, although one of the drapes got ripped off by some customers. Stuff like that, or Jurassic Park arcades. The Walking Dead that was previously mentioned, those would be environmental deluxe cabinets. But yeah, it's not as common now to be finding new games releasing with a ceiling. They're more open, like this Goldstorm Pirates, but it still has a motion seat. I don't remember what the pricing is on this one. I think it's somewhere in the $20,000 range, above 20,000. Whereas Taika no Tatsujin, if I'm recalling correctly, it was something like $14,995 or something around there. Now, of course, the one big caveat with Taika no Tatsujin is that it's the first run of it was limited to 100 units. Now, I still count that as officially released. It's just the next batch apparently won't be available until this spring. So I'm not sure why it takes so long, but my guess is just they're probably being produced overseas, have to wait on containers and other stuff like that. That's my best guess. Oh, and Forge, thank you for that location watch. I'll have to make a note on that one and make sure that we get that mentioned in the next location watch. It also mentioned earlier that Godzilla Kaiju Wars VR had the 3 new chapters, but in case you missed it, I have not heard anything on that yet as to when those chapters are going to be available. Ever since I was talking with Raw Thrills about that back in October, they haven't committed to a date, and my guess is they're just doing any extra polish that's needed, making sure that the levels are as good as possible. I mean, I didn't notice anything that looked unfinished, but I'm sure there's still just tweaks that they're giving to it to make sure that it's the best possible game that it can be. Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, now that I think about it, CES 2024 in Vegas had a DPVR booth. DPVR is a Chinese company that develops VR headsets, and they actually created a headset that was just for arcade use. And they were at CES 2024 with Godzilla Kaiju Wars VR because it uses their headset. But Ted is saying here on YouTube that it's actually at CES 2025 and it has all 5 levels on it. So again, I'm going to keep asking Raw Thrills, and I have to assume that the update is going to be out soon. Another thing that was shown off at IAPA was an update to NBA Superstars, which brought the game more in line with NBA Jam, making it run faster and making it so you could score more frequently and stuff. And so, but that one is out now. That came out in December, and pre-update too, just as the remaining chapters of Godzilla VR are going to be. Now, if you had missed the IAPA news, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we covered there. We had to break it into 5 parts, and really, I still want to do one last part where I'm getting into all of the different when are these things shipping. But it's been kind of frustrating. I still am waiting to hear back from a few different companies as to when things are shipping because they aren't saying. Sorry, let me fix my camera here. There we go. So I might just have to roll with it and run something. But now we get to new games releases and what came out in 2024. So I posted this video there if you want to watch that. Instead of watching that, let me go up here to new releases. Now, of course, this page is currently focused on 2025, but from here you can go and click on 2024, and we can see what came out last year. And I actually still need to go back and do some house cleaning on this one. I don't remember if we got everything from Asia figured out correctly there. But for North America and Europe, just what I scrolled through here, these are all the games that came out to arcades last year in North America. And so if this is what a dead industry looks like, say like Blockbuster Video or Hollywood Video, then it's kind of odd, don't you think? And so we always alphabetize this as opposed to doing it by months. So I suppose we could do it by months instead. But let's start at the top. We had ABBA Pinball by Pinball Brothers, which was, if I'm recalling correctly, this was their 3rd game, maybe 2nd or 3rd game. I can't remember if I think Queen was their 2nd game, and that's Queen based on the Freddie Mercury band. ABBA, of course, being based on the famous Swedish pop band. And this is the first time I saw this and got to play it, as well as Queen, as well as Alien by Pinball Brothers. It was all at Pinball Expo. And So I guess that's a little frustrating thing where it's like pinball is, as I mentioned, popular within culture right now in both United States and Europe. But there's a lot of these smaller pinball companies that do not ever go to any of the big events like I just talked about, like Amusement Expo or IAPA. They'll go to Pinball Expo because that's where a lot of their buyers are. And that makes sense because a lot of purchases for pinball these days come from consumers, from people that have enough money to put a pinball machine in their house.
Have a good one.
Yep, you too. Thank you. And of course, as you've seen today, as I'm talking about how poorly pinball does, I've had all my plays today have been on pinball. Funny enough, I guess it's the universe telling me something. I don't know. But the numbers don't lie. But I found this to be a fun game. I mean, I'm not any fan of ABBA, so I couldn't tell you much about them and all that. I mean, I'm familiar with just their most popular songs, but again, to me, it's more about the game itself. But I understand that when it comes to a band, when it's well integrated with the music and certain things that you know of from the band, then that makes it a more fulfilling gaming experience. And so I'm sure that ABBA fans would find a lot to enjoy from this. But just as a game from somebody that is not a fan, that particular band, I thought it was fun. Airstrike, this was released in January by LAI Games, and I need to I can't recall if this is correct, if it was Ace Amusement or if it's actually Super Wing. But you can all these games, you should be able to find videos of them on our channel here on the YouTube side. But Airstrike is interesting in that it's kind of sort of like some of the Sega flight games from the 90s, like what was that, Sky Strike? Not entirely. Okay, it is Ace. Yeah. And but it uses a pendulum motion system, and so like most of the motion systems that are out there these days use these rubber air bladders and use an air compressor to put air in or suck it out of them to move it around, and that's been a great solution that drastically reduced pricing on motion games, because it used to be they were all like electric hydraulics or something, and those machines would always be at minimum $30,000 or something, and that was back in the day when game prices were a lot lower. Okay, so it is Ace Amusement. Thank you, guys. But yeah, with this one, doing pendulum is very interesting. It's like I think it was the Afterburner 2 Deluxe, where it had pendulum as well as sliding back and forth. And that was like what, 87. But there was also, if I'm recalling correctly, Space Harrier. The motion version also had a pendulum thing. Again, I could be. It's been such a long time since I've come across one. But either way, I like it when there's these different developers who bring back some old ideas that are still viable. It's just for whatever reason nobody uses them anymore. And so, but the pendulum swinging thing works. Now, the game itself could use some extra polish. The one thing that mainly bugged me about this game was that there was no accelerator, and so you just go. Now you could hit, I think it was these rings to give you a nitro boost sort of effect, but it still always feels a little bit frustrating when you can't control your speed. But I guess this was developed more for the redemption side. I mean, it works fine as an amusement side, and probably the motion is the main attraction out of this anyways. Now, there's a local FEC here to me called Fat Cats, and they invited me to visit the grand opening of one of their locations here in Utah, and they had an Airstrike there, and we were talking about it, and he was saying that it was one of their best performing games. And so I was a little surprised by that. And again, that gets back to where it's frustrating to get numbers in this industry because everybody's a little different, but also there's so few that share numbers. It's like what you see in replay is not really indicative of what everybody else is seeing. It's just who they poll that happens to report it. Or there's I can't remember the name of it. There's another company that puts out, I think the Redemption Report is what it's called, and that has some numbers, but it's also very limited as to what games they show. And it's like, I wish there was a way for us to easily see numbers across the industry, even if it was all anonymous as to who the exact location was, but just to see how games really perform compared to each other. And so yeah, that one apparently does pretty well. Don't know what the pricing is on it though. Angry Birds Boom. This came out in October. It debuted at. Oh yeah, that was a trade show I forgot to mention. The International Bowl Expo, which to me it's a little embarrassing because I missed that because I missed my flight because I slept in. Oh well. But Angry Birds Boom is a redemption game where it's the Angry Birds concept, but in first person, and levels are very short, 20 seconds or so. I think maybe the operator can adjust that slightly, but you fire the birds at the pigs and the structures and knock out as many as you can, get as many points as you can, and win as many tickets as you can. Eventually have a boss battle. I haven't heard how that one's doing, but I assume it's doing pretty well. Site friend Kevin Williams likes to call it Angry Nerf because it's obviously using the same sort of cabinet and somewhat of not entirely the same gameplay ideas as Nerf Arcade did by Raw Thrills. But, I mean, between the two, I would go for Angry Birds Boom over Nerf Arcade. That's just me, I guess. Came out in October. Animal Kaiser Plus. So as I mentioned before, this was a kidtainment sort of game. The cabinets are short, a little bit shorter than I am. I'm not a tall person. But obviously the control panel designed for children to enjoy, and also the gameplay itself. And so you get a card that has an animal on it or a mutation or something. It has some weird alien stuff in it too, which I found strange. I think it's something like 60 cards that you can collect, but you scan it in and put your animal in, and then you do battles, and it's just 2 buttons, and it's kind of like a slot machine sort of thing where it's going through all these different modifiers, gameplay modifiers, and you push the button and it'll stop. And then there's 2 modifiers every time, and then your animals, depending on the strengths of each animal and then what modifiers you get, so then they'll do battle and you try and win, stuff like that. Very inexpensive game. As far, if I recall correctly, it was under $5,000, like $49.95. Gotta love that. $49.99 and 99 cents. It's under $5,000 technically. But like I said, this, if I wasn't still crawling out of debt, I probably would grab one of these just because I do get a few kids that come through here. Apex Rebels, as aforementioned, came out on February 6th. Now, this is something that's rare. We almost never get an exact date of when something starts production and shipping out. Like I mentioned at the beginning, in case you missed it, is most arcade developers don't like to tell you when they're shipping stuff out. And more often than not, I'm finding out about a game that's been released when it's already out there. And it's just like, I wish that the manufacturers would take at least a moment. I know they all have meetings of some kind, planning meetings and whatnot. And it's like, let's plan out our release and let the press know about this so they can share it with their readers and such. And so that way we know when something's out there. But Sega, for their part, did do something like that for Apex Rebels. And again, this is a racing game, carries a spirit of Sega 90s arcade racers, has a motion base, pretty good motion from what I recall. As I mentioned, I enjoyed the sounds. I enjoyed the graphics on this one. The way that it drives as well, it takes some skill. It's not just, it's, sit in front of the steering wheel, not even touch it and let the game drive for you. So I appreciate that. Hey Max, how's it going?
Pretty good. Keep it too.
Okay.
I'm so quiet today at the mall.
Oh, it's been really busy up until like 10 minutes ago. I've had
Outside.
Oh, that I don't know, but we've had people playing pinball all morning. All right, I'm back. And that's actually one of my regulars. He comes in not every day, but pretty frequently and plays Miss Pac-Man. almost exclusively, and so we always appreciate that. Yeah, Apex Rebels is out there. I don't remember what the pricing is on this one. I remember that Sega was saying at first that they were going to release 2 monitor versions, like a 65-inch and then a 49-inch version. But I think they might have abandoned the 49-inch and they're just doing the 65. I don't know, maybe Luis, or you might be selling some of those out there. You can let me know if that's the case or not. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing like a non-motion 49-inch version that would come in at a cheaper price. Make it easier for a location like me to grab. I mean, I have thought about getting another racing game. Obviously, where Maximum Tune and Cruisin' are in my top 3. Probably a good idea. Arcade Collection Live by Incredible Technologies came out on June 10th. Incredible Technologies is another company that they're one of the rare ones that actually bothers to tell you when their games are coming out, which day. But it's just 3 of their older games: Silver Strike Bowling, Power Putt something. Now I'm forgetting Power Putt, whatever. And Target Toss Bags, all 3 in one. But I find it kind of funny how they call that Arcade Collection. It's almost like maybe just Sports Collection or something. But according to Replay Magazine, at least from the operators they poll, that game does very well. It's always in the top 5 every month. So, oddly enough. But it probably, again, it's dependent on the location. I don't know if a game like Arcade Collection would do really well in my place. Back when I was a teenager, I worked at an FEC that used to be just about a block away from where I'm at right now, called the Hollywood Connection. They've long since closed, and right now it's like an insurance company took over the building, ripped out the movie theaters, ripped out the roller coaster and all that stuff, and the arcade area, and remodeled the place. But we had a Golden Tee there. It was a fairly large arcade. I think it was about 150 games. But Golden Tee 98 was always in the bottom 3 games, like that, Radical Bikers, and one other one. So thanks to Luis from Planeta Arcade, he mentions on LinkedIn that Apex Rebels is 18,500. He says set of 2 cars. So, Luis, do you mean 18,500 per machine, or does that cover both? Let me know. Because sometimes there are sales like what we have on the screen right here, Asphalt Moto Blitz DX, comes in what's called a twin model. And like Sega used to do this a lot in the 90s. Sorry if I keep bumping my microphone here. This thing is out of my field of depth there, so maybe that'll work better. But like if you buy an Asphalt Moto Blitz DX, it comes with the 2 instead of just the 1, and so that's what you would, I guess, call a twin model. But that came out in January, and that was developed by IGS, Wallop, and LAI Games. And so if you want high-end graphics and sound, motorcycle racing, then this is a great looking one. I'm not sure how well it's done. I assume it's done pretty well, because I know Asphalt Legends 9 Arcade did well, and I assume if you have that plus this next to each other, that would do well. But also just motorcycle games in general always do really well in this business. In fact, I have Near In by Namco, which came out in 2008, and I had 2 of them were down all year, but still it was in my top 10. So that is something to consider, I guess, when it comes to any sort of motorcycle racing arcade games. But one of the coolest things about Asphalt Moto Blitz is the LED effects on the wheel. It's one of my favorites. It's really awesome to see. But this is a game I do need to play more of myself and get a better feel for it. Asteroids Recharge Arcade came out in November. And so one other significant thing about this one, I talked a little bit about it earlier, and that I did contribute to some game design things through the Allen One Brain Trust, is that this won the IAPA Brass Ring Award for Games and Devices, first place at IAPA, which is a pretty significant achievement, I think, for them. And I'm not taking credit for that. I'm just saying that it's pretty astounding that a newcomer would be able to get first place prize and that sort of thing. And now part of the reason why, because I've had some people ask me about this, like, oh, it's just Asteroids, right? Is that Allen One developed their own app called Major League Esports, or MLES, and you can find it on iOS and Android. And it's an app that essentially, it's like Stearns Insider connected, and so you can create a free account and you track your scores and achievements and stuff like that. But it also will inform you if somebody's beat your score. It'll tell you that your score was beat by so and so and where it was beat at, which arcade got it beat at. So it notifies players to come back, and it also has a location finder so you can find their games on it. And so that's a cool little feature on that. And so I know that's part of the reason why they won the Brass Ring Award. But that's also supposed to be integrated in all the Alan 1 arcade games that are going to be out there. But this exists in both a 2-player and a 3-player format, and came out in November. Very beginning of November. Avatar Fire and Ice by Jersey Jack Pinball, which is no longer located in New Jersey, but Chicago. Sadly enough, the first time I came across this game, and it's a beautiful looking game. When you see this in person, it's like, wow, the quality of the artwork, the lighting effects, it looks cinematic. Now, of course, you could say that for a lot of pinball machines, but I don't know what it is that they did with Avatar, but it's something about the visuals really stand out, and that's what you would expect with Avatar, since it's one of the big special effects heavy type movies out there, and that's what it's really known for. But I didn't get to play it at Pinball Expo because every single time, or the one time I came across one was right before the show opened, and one of the flippers wasn't working. It's like, oh, okay, I can't experience this. And then later on, every time I tried to play it, I would have had to stand in line for quite a while because it was very, very popular. And so I was able to film it, but I wasn't able to play it until IAPA. But I had fun with it. I guess just the problem with pinball, as I've mentioned before on other videos, is especially when you get pinball that's above $10,000, it's like I already find it hard to pay off pinball machines that I bought for, say, $6,000 back when they used to be that much. And like the ROI that I've calculated is 8 to 10 years. Now, the argument against that is, well, pinball holds its value generally. Not always, though. Depends on the theme. Like I said, I've noticed that Mandalorian's not holding its value very well. And that just seems to be because demand in Star Wars has gone down. But, it's... the maintenance on pins, it's like that's something that's hard to calculate how much have to go into them, but it's like I've had to fix every single one of my machines, and sometimes I've had to spend a little bit of money to do that. And it's really frustrating. And so like Avatar, yes, it's really cool to look at, but it's $12,000 to start. Now, the problem is that it's like, sure, it probably will do all right on location, but will it do all right enough to warrant $12,000? Like, could it make $1,000 a month over the course of a year to pay itself off in a year? At least from what I saw, it's like you saw my numbers earlier if you were here. And Luis is saying on Apex Rebels, it's 18.5K for one car. Thank you, Luis. But back on pinball is that, the ROI is just, it's outrageous. And again, you can't rely on, on how things might be, that it might appreciate. Now, part of the reason why the pricing is like this, because again, a vast majority of buyers of pinball these days are not arcade operators like me, it's collectors. But in my personal opinion, I could be wrong about this, but I believe that this actually damages things for pinball on location, because it's like most of the people that know what pinball is and know how to play it at this point are buying machines and they have it at their home. And so it's rare that they come out and play at the location. So they're not feeding money into a location because they already paid all this money to have the machines at home that they really want anyways. Now, yes, can be exceptions to that, like tournaments, but for the most part, not completely, but for the most part, most of the local guys that are really into pinball, they only come when it's tournament time. Now, again, there are some exceptions. There are a couple of guys that I've seen come in outside of tournaments and everything, but I mean, I get it from their perspectives. Like if I already have all these machines, or let's say you have a bunch of friends that also collect pinball machines, why bother to go out to location? But the kind of indirect effect of all this is that they just don't make a lot of money on location. Now, again, this depends on the location too. Sure, if I was serving alcohol, I'd probably be maybe making more money on it, but that's also not a guarantee too. I've talked with an operator in Wisconsin who's ran pinball for longer than I've been in this business. And he said that, yeah, my pinball does okay, but it doesn't do exceptionally well at bars either. He sees kind of the same thing. And so, yeah, for some, it's just a labor of love. But yeah, I guess I'm getting off on a tangent here. I could talk all day about pinball and my frustrations here. It's like, I think the thing is that I think there is a way to make pinball earn again on location. What that key is, I don't know. Is it tutorials? Is it something else? I'm not sure. I had hoped that Insider Connected was it, but unfortunately, I've noticed that most customers don't use Insider Connected. They have no idea what it is. The Pinball XP that Jersey Jack and Creative Works showed at IAPA, which was also included with, like you can get that for Avatar, was very impressive looking. But I can't remember what the price was, but I heard it was quite outrageous. And so it's like, if you're making it even more expensive, I don't know, like unless you can prove that really brings people in like it never has before, then sorry, I'm going to have to pass. Oh, thank you, Bush and Ryu Cats, for the $5 super sticker. Salute to you for that. I really appreciate that. Barrio's Barbecue Challenge, another pinball machine. I've heard mixed opinions on this one. I mean, it is a much simpler pinball play field than something like Avatar. This came out in March. I mean, I like the theme. I like the barbecue and everything, and I love the LED effects on the barbecue pop bumpers there. But I do need to play the game a little bit more. I mean, I don't know. I didn't get a great feel for it from the few times that I played it, but I guess I just need to spend more time. And I'm not the best pinball player. Sorry, I guess I shouldn't be having a carbonated beverage so I don't burp into the microphone. Very professional around here. Bigfoot Mayhem also came out in March, and this was the Eunice's answer to Fast and Furious Arcade by Raw Thrills, using the same two-screen setup and a motion seat, just like Fast and Furious Arcade Deluxe did. But this came in at about almost $10,000 less than Fast and Furious Arcade, and Bigfoot is a name that I think is known out there. I mean, I knew it because I grew up in the 80s, and I remember when monster trucks were a cool thing and people talked about them. I remember, I think I had a friend who even had like a Bigfoot toy or something. And now I never went to a monster truck event. I always kind of wanted to. But yeah, so if you're into monster trucks at all or just off-roading racing, then this game fits that and comes in at a much more affordable price than a Fast and Furious does. Although this is one thing that I should say is part of my frustration from my APA. I have emailed 3 different people at Eunice. Unfortunately, I don't have any phone numbers to just call them directly. But I have not been able to get an answer from Eunice as to when their games are shipping. And so it's like, I really would like to do that. It's like, I'm trying to help you out, guys. So please, just tell me when these games that you showed off at IAPA are shipping. Just whenever it is, if it's already shipping or not. But at least I know for Bigfoot Mayhem it was March. Let's see. Bobblehead Baseball Versus by Animero USA came out in January, and this was also a surprising one. I mean, it's been a very long time since we had a video game or a video baseball game for the business. Now, Versus, what this changed was it added a second player. Now, this game can be played for tickets. That was actually how it was originally designed, but you could also set it to non-tickets and play a straight video game. I think this one's somewhere around $6,000 on price in that range, so it's also another affordable game. This is another one that I might actually try if I could afford it. Is that because it'd be interesting to see how a sports video game would go here. And sorry, just checking chat really quick. I've seen. I actually haven't seen much at CS show myself. I don't know about those in chat yet. I haven't seen the hologram box or the mini of my arcade toys I mean, I think I've heard of many of my arcades before, but the only thing I've seen so far from CES that's supposed to be there is the new Dungeons and Dragons pinball by Stern. I do wish I should have looked into going to CES. I've always wanted to go to that. Or to quote Tron, to be extra nerdy, is you've seen one consumer electronics show, you've seen them all, but I haven't been to one. So. Let's see. Now, X Arcadia, Breaker's Revenge Chicago came out in August, and so this was the return of Breaker's Revenge. I actually have Breaker's Revenge on the Neo Geo, but this version brought it up into HD, fixed some other things from like other bugs from the original, added some new game modes and stuff. I don't think they added any new characters or anything, but if you've never played Breaker's Revenge, I know this is popular in like the hardest core of fighting circles, but it's essentially like a more advanced Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. And so there's a dash mechanic that Street Fighter doesn't have that is there in Breaker's Revenge. And of course, the look of it is kind of like Street Fighter 2. But it's a fun game, and definitely if you're into fighting games, check it out. But Chicago brings it to the modern age, and this would be, maybe I should say instead of arcade exclusive content, I should say this is arcade exclusive, because there's no, as far as I'm aware, even close to like Breaker's Revenge Chicago version out there. But somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong. Cambria Sword Another Cry. This just barely came out also for the X Arcadia. It, unfortunately, it was not at IAPA 2024, but this is a scrolling shoot 'em up. And it has a very unique art style to it, with lots of different objects that are kind of layered on each other, and interesting use of color as well. And it also has an enormous amount of bosses, something like 80 bosses, I think, and also a bunch of levels and such. So it sounds like for shoot 'em up fans, this is really a good game that you would want to check out. And it would also be greatly enhanced over any existing like Steam version or mobile version. I can't remember what that came from, but this would essentially also be just an exclusive to arcades now through X Arcadia. Evil Dead Pinball came out from Spooky Pinball in December. I was disappointed in the fact that they didn't have this at Pinball Expo. It's like, that would have been a nice place to announce it, I would think, but maybe it just wasn't ready. But at least from the videos that I've seen of this one looks really cool. I don't know what the price is on it. I mean, that topper, it's like, that's how you do a topper. And I like that it's integrated into the top of the machine as opposed to a $2,000 add-on that you get later on. Like that, I saw Retro Ralph did a video about the Metallica topper this past week, and it's just like, yeah, I don't see how a topper is going, especially one that costs $1,000 or $2,000, is going to make my machine make that much more money. And so if they could show that, then sure, but otherwise no. But at least in this one, where it's integrated into the back box in a clever way that really fits with the movies, and then other things about the playfield, just this seemed like one of Spooky Pinball's best designed machines, at least from the impression I have. I mean, I could be wrong since I haven't played this in person yet. But I think that's shipping out now. Fixate Exo Label. That one is also just came out in October. Now, this one is definitely, I would say, an arcade exclusive, because there's several things that changed about this, including adding 2 extra players, so it's a 4-player game. Hey. There you go. And if you've never played this one, it's like Outzone, and that's something that Exa mentioned to me, is that with Fixate, even though, if I'm recalling correctly, it's the sequel to Outzone, or the spiritual sequel to Outzone, is that they actually changed some things about how it controls, how it plays, to bring it more in line with Outzone, which is considered the better game. Sorry, I just need to move some quarters over here. But I played this at IAPA, and I had fun with it. It's a cool game. If you're into run and guns, especially vertical run and guns, then I think it fits with what you want. System 11 mentions on YouTube, can't believe how expensive pins are now. When Woz came out, people said it was overpriced. That original RRP looks like a bargain now. Yeah, it does. And that's what's driven me crazy. I mean, I guess maybe it's I shouldn't be thinking of what the prices were like 10 years ago when a pro Stern pinball machine was 5,500 or 5,400 or something like that. Um, but now it's, what are they, 7,000 USD? And then of course over in the UK it's going to be even more for you guys to import. And yeah, it's frustrating. It's so frustrating because it's like, I love pinball because it is something that you don't get off of your phone or home consoles. Like even a digital pinball doesn't fully recreate that experience. But yeah, how do you justify it? Like Galactic Tank Force Signature Edition, I think this is a $12,000 pinball machine. It looks rad. I love the tank treads with the animated LEDs on the sides. It's really cool, and I like the game. I mean, it's got a few frustrating things about it, where it's easy for the pinball to shoot down your throat, so to speak. But I still love the original design. I love how it has Carrie Ann Hoskins, who was one of the Sonya Blade actresses and stuff. But yeah, would this make money on my location? Probably not, any more than anything else. That one came out in February, by the way. Godzilla Kaiju Wars VR, which we've already talked about a bit, came out in April. But of course, the 5 chapters are still TBA, hopefully this month sometime. I guess after this, I'll send another message to my contact at Rothrails and just be like, Happy New Year. Do you know anything about the chapters? I kind of hate doing that. It's like I'm friendly with the people there, but I don't want to feel like all I'm doing is reaching out to you because I want to know something. Golden Tee 2025, or Golden Tee PGA Tour 2025 is what that should say. It came out on September 9th. I didn't see any new artwork that they released for this. It sounds like it's mainly just a software update, adding new courses and stuff. If you're into Golden Tee, I mean, this should be the ultimate Golden Tee that's out there. But I don't closely follow every single thing that's added to Golden Tee. I mean, I do think it's cool that they updated, they've remastered some really old courses for it that have been custom designed for the original Golden Tee. I mean, that's cool. Yeah, system. Yeah, I mean, the only Jersey Jack I've owned was a dialed in, but I was highly disappointed in how that performed because I think I paid something like $9,000 for it. I got an LE version, which was close to what the original price was, even though I bought it used. But it had only been in a home collection, and the guy had to sell it because he lost his job and he was moving out of state. And he didn't want to take all his pinballs with him, and he had a ton of pinballs. But I bought Dialed In thinking that this is the most advanced pinball machine ever released. Even though it's an original design, I think the tech behind it will do really well. And it's the worst performing new pinball machine that I've ever had. And that caused a little bit of anguish in me, just because it's like, I want this to do so well. Not just for me, but I just want to see it doing well. But it didn't. And I think part of it might have been the license. I don't know. Although, in my opinion, I shouldn't say honest opinion because it seems like I'm lying sometimes. But in my opinion, I think it wasn't the fact that it was not a license. It was how it handled it. Like when you approached Dialed In, you had no idea what it was trying to convey because it was so messy. It's like, when you start the game, it has an animation of this guy saying, here's your phone, here's your new phone, and then you're shooting it around, and then all of a sudden, like a giant spider is attacking, and the meteorites are falling, and it doesn't explain what on earth is going on. Now, the LE came with a comic book that would explain, oh, yeah, this was like some sort of quantum device, and it could manipulate the weather, but the game itself did not teach the player that, and so it's entirely confusing. And so it's like, if you're not going to explain the context behind the game, especially when you're not using a license, you need to explain that clearly and quickly. And without that, it becomes confusing. And then it's like, if something's confusing, why are you going to put a lot of effort into it? Again, my opinion there, maybe I'm wrong. Hello, Kevin. Thanks for joining us here on the chat. We're not sure how far along we are now. I've been at this for a couple of hours. I guess my voice is filling it. But Yeah, I mean, I think Dialed In is rewarding once you really get into it and you really learn it, but I can see why it's just hard for new people to get into, because just the way that it was all handled, that the storytelling was handled on it, was just done in a maybe a haphazard way. And I think when you're not working with a license and you're coming up with your own original thing, you have to present it in a better way. It's like Galactic Take Force, I think, did a much better job at telling its story. I mean, still probably could use a little bit of help there, but I think that was handled better. But my guess, from what I hear, it sounds like Jersey Jack's never going to do a non-license again because of how Dialed In did. But it's like, you just need to, hire a writer. It's not that hard to find writers these days. Hire a good writer. You can find good writers; they still exist, and have them craft it for you. But also with the mentality of, this is in a location, it needs to get the point across as lightning fast as you can. And if you can't do that, then you need to change something about it. Again, my opinion. Halo Fireteam Raven 2-player assault model came out on October 30th. One of the rare instances where we have an exact date for something from Raw Thrills. I'm glad this came out. This is something I wish, when we first saw this on test back in 2021, I wish it would have came out then. 6 years after the original game came out, it feels like a little too late for that. But would I get one for my location? Yeah, probably. Maybe I'd swap my Aliens Armageddon out for it, or my Outnumbered. I don't know. But I also just wonder, it's like, is it too far past its due date? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. It's like Jurassic Park still earns really well. It's my second best earning game of last year. So maybe Halo will have that staying power too. Even though that TV show is garbage. Jaws Pinball came out in January. I already mentioned that a little bit. And I had fun with this one. I like this one too. I think you really used the license very well. And it was cool that they had not just Jaws in there, but the other sequels that became kind of memes in a way. Even Jaws 3D. Jitsu Squad featuring the Samurai Pizza Cats. I guess we need to put on there also X Arcadia. And so I've seen some more comments on this one on YouTube where people are surprised by it. Fans of the Samurai Pizza Cats starting to find out about it. It would be cool if you could pick the other Samurai Pizza Cats to play as opposed to them just being assist characters. But still, this is something that's exclusive to the arcade version. But it's not just the characters that were added to this. The arcade version is much more polished. Like, I have it on Switch, and there's certain little bugs and other things, like even text, how it looks and how it's aligned is not well done on the Switch version, whereas on the arcade version, all very well polished. And the other thing that I appreciate about this game is it's a beat 'em up, a 4-player beat 'em up or a brawler. Don't know which people prefer to call that genre, but like, your old Ninja Turtles or Simpsons or Knights of the Round, etc. It's nice to have another beat 'em up in arcades again, a 2D beat 'em up. I mean, sure, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade by Raw Thrills, which is actually sitting over here across from me on the other side of these games. But I had fun with this. I played it at IAPA. I have video of this on the channel, and this is one that I am probably going to end up getting here, because I do have a 4-player XR cabinet, and so it'd be nice to have a game that uses all 4 controls. Oops, I'm spilling. Next up is another pinball. I mean, if you hadn't noticed already, there's quite a lot of pinball coming out there now. But Stern, I mean, they're definitely doing pretty well. I mean, even just their factory, the investments or the investors that they've been able to get their hands on have been very beneficial to the company in being able to produce their primary product. But John Wick came out in May, and I did shoot some video of this at a local bar, but I misplaced the file. I'm embarrassed to say that, but I still need to find that and dig it up and put that on the channel, because as I was looking through games releases in 2024 and looking for footage, I was like, I thought I had posted this to my YouTube channel, and it turns out that I hadn't. And so if not, I'll just have to go and go over there again and play it. But I know that one thing that disappointed people about this, and I didn't realize this at first either, is that like there's no guns on the playfield, and it's like, why would you make a John Wick machine and not have guns on it? I don't know. It seems strange. I think it was the Pro. I can't remember if they had a Pro or a Premium. So maybe the Premium had a gun on it. I don't know. But if we have light gun games where you still have guns, like actual guns that you're holding on there, it's like in a pinball machine, you're just seeing a little tiny model on there. It's like, I don't know. It's almost. Does the James Bond one not also have a gun on it too? It's like that. Also seems like it should be something that was there. Oh well. Lane Master Extreme came out in March, which was the sequel to Lane Master, which was a popular bowling video game. And I do like bowling in this format, kind of like a skee ball or aka alley bowler as well. And Extreme just has a lot more LEDs, more game modes, I think more polished gameplay. They had a weird sort of power-up capsule module on it that you see in this picture here, but I don't know if many locations bothered with that. It was a little bit confusing what the point of that was, but I guess it was trying to do like extra sales with capsules or something to make it earn better, but I don't know how that worked out. And of course, a lot of operators, when they saw that, it's like, well, people are going to roll those into the game, and then you're going to get jam or something. So it's like, yeah, that would probably happen. I mentioned this earlier. Marvel Contest of Champions came out in June. It debuted at Amusement Expo, which was a surprise because kind of just forgot about it after it was a Dave & Buster's exclusive. Just figured it'd be a D&B exclusive forever, but it turned out to just be a 5-year exclusive. Now at IAPA, they did unveil new artwork for this one, like a new header that focused on Deadpool and Wolverine. I think from the software itself, the only thing that was really changed was the attract mode to also focus on Deadpool and Wolverine. Makes sense since that was actually a Marvel movie that was making some money. After Endgame, it's been a little tough for some of the Marvel stuff. And Ted mentions on YouTube that the Wallop showcase for Marvel in China was also crazy. And so just sometimes they spend money on that stuff and take it to as far as they possibly can, but then other times you don't know. Mega Shot. This is a cool one. This was one that debuted at IAPA 2023. This exists in two different models. There's a single screen version, and then there's this double screen version. Now, I've talked with Rob at Jet Games USA, and he explained to me that the double screen version has more powerful PC hardware to drive both screens, but he said it would also result in better performance on the game compared to the single screen version. But if you hadn't seen this one, look up the videos that I have of this, and this uses some really cool full metal guns. I think they're made out of aluminum. But it's the closest thing to like saying putting a real gun onto a machine. Of course, we've had real guns, real airsoft pistols with that game that Eunice and Taito did a few years ago that they called On Point or Gun Arena over in Japan, which had to be changed for an obvious reason. But this one, or of course, all these shooting gallery games were inspired by that Taito game, as they use a similar type of game style. But what's really cool about this Mega Shot one, again, is it's a rifle instead of a pistol. Of course, there is Big Shot by Jet Games, where it is a metal pistol. And I mentioned earlier how Electrocoin has their skill shooter game, which also uses a metal pistol. But this one decided to go with full rifles, which are sort of based on an AR rifle. And it's powered by a air compressor, and so there's moments in the game where it'll unlock a fully auto mode where you hold the trigger down and it's a lot of fun to play that. And this is one I want to get more footage of. This is also a game that if I could afford it, I'd probably grab one because I think it's really cool and exclusive to arcades. Single screen version came out in June, dual screen in July. And if I recall correctly, both of them were above 20,000. Metallica Remastered. This is one that interesting that Stern is trying this and being interested to see how well that does. from what I played at IAPA, because I missed it at Pinball Expo because I left the day before they decided to bring it out to the show, was definitely plays better than the original one, and I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it's just the better, newer look and the updated screen and all that stuff that they put into it just made it the director's cut version of the game. So I'm looking forward to seeing more remasters. Which pinball machine would you like to see remastered? For me, I'd like to see Tron Legacy. Of course, maybe they're planning on just doing a whole new Tron one because you have Tron Ares coming out. I think it's this year. So it makes sense for them to do a new one based on that. But I've also been thinking about maybe trying a music pinball here because my Guardians of the Galaxy, that's the closest that I got to a music pin, and where that does okay. But of course, again, I don't know if I want okay. I want something that does well when I'm paying that much for a pinball machine. 2-player version of Minecraft Dungeons Arcade came out in April. Monster Kart, I think, I'm not 100% sure about this since I haven't gotten an answer from Eunice, but I'm pretty sure from what their website says is that Monster Kart came out in December. And what was cool about this one, even though it's obviously trying to rip off Mario Kart, is that it has a go-kart style seat, motion seat. And, Mario Kart doesn't have that. It just has your normal arcade seats. But I had fun with it. I thought it was a fine game. And I guess it got a lot of attention at IAPA as well. It sounded like it got the most attention out of all their stuff, although I would have thought Dino Storm probably would have captured that because I saw a lot more people playing that than I saw a lot of people playing Monster Kart as well. But Dino Storm was fun too with the rowing and stuff. But maybe that came out and I just don't know for sure. NBA Superstars came out in August, and no, it did have a limited release prior to that. I think it was just Dave & Buster's. Was it also around one exclusive? I can't remember. But also of a note, if you played this one before December, go back and play it again. If you have a location near you that has it, because there has been a major software update which changed things about that, gave the players bigger heads, kind of like NBA Jam, made things move a little bit faster. So that should be the better version of the game to go and play. I think these ones are around 15,000, if I recall correctly. And have I thought about it? Yeah, but it's just been one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of things I've been thinking about. I don't know which one I would be ready to buy when I'm out of certain debts, which will be happening soon at least. Omen of Sorrow: Rising Chaos by X Arcadia. This one, I think it's fair. This one's fairly close to the PS4 version, except better graphics, like anti-aliasing and the full. I think it was in 4K and 60 frames a second and all that, and faster input response. But just not. I don't know that there's any different characters or anything to that one. That came out on May 4th. May the 4th be with you. But not a Star Wars game. Pac-Man's Pixel Bash for charity. The only difference on this one is you can see all the money that you get there, but obviously for charity events, probably not something an arcade probably wants to be putting out there and having a bunch of people in the public seeing something like that. But that came out in April. Sorry, I broke in here. Phantom Breaker Omnia, a 2D or 2.5D fighter. All the characters are 2D drawn, but then the backgrounds are 3D, kind of like Marvel vs. Capcom 2. By Rocket Panda Games and X Arcadia. Came out in July. That's also one where I'm not sure what might be different about it compared to the Steam release, other than faster input response. Pump It Up Phoenix 2024 came out in June, and this was at IAPA. I filmed it a little bit. That's actually something I still need to upload, but I don't remember if I don't think I spent a ton of time on it. Sometimes it's just showing footage of people dancing intensely, not so much the gameplay. But I need to do a better job on filming all the gameplay elements of Pump It Up. Skull of Shadow by Ace Amusement and Amusement Source International. So this actually has 3 models. So the one you see here is the upright 4-player tethered version. Also at the Ace Amusement booth at IAPA 2024, they had the mounted gun version, which is only 3 players. And then there is a sit-down mounted gun, I think 2-player version that has it's an enclosed environmental cabinet that also has a motion base. And so this one, at first, I thought it was just a Dead Storm Pirates clone, because like you see here on this image provided by Ace Amusement, it shows an undead skeleton pirate guy, and so it's like, okay, that's like Dead Storm Pirates. But as you see in the video that you watch of this, it's actually a little bit more like Jumanji. So it's like, okay, that's cool. I'm glad you went in that slightly different route. Also even the marquee makes it look like it's just all about pirates, but like in the game, it's more modern people, and they look kind of like they're Jumanji characters, and like fighting a giant crocodile amongst modern ruins and stuff. So definitely one of Ace Amusement's more polished games from what I observed. And so this one came out in November. Smash DX, previously mentioned, debuting at Amusement Expo, came out in May, and this is off-road racing with motion base and everything. The only thing that threw me off on this one was the voice acting. It felt like it was done by AI, and it sounds so strange. And so, I mean, maybe that's part of the charm. I don't know, but I guess it kind of grated on me a little bit from that one. Surf League by Ace Amusement and Coastal Amusements. Again, as somebody mentioned in chat earlier, that China's definitely stepping up their game, and so as you keep seeing Ace Amusements popping up over and over and over again, they're really producing a lot of content out there, and like I said, they're improving on it. There's still some places, like when I played Surf League, this is another one where, kind of like with Airstrike, there's no way to really accelerate, and so that's where it feels like you're not really in control of it. So I guess it just depends on you hitting the ramps and getting through the boosts and stuff. So, yeah. But, I mean, it's a fun game for kids. Looked great. That one came out in April. Super Blaster, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning. If you missed it, this is a game that comes with a very high price tag. And that's because it's essentially a slimmed down version of the XD Dark Ride or the XD Dark Theater. And those start at $250,000, whereas this is somewhere around $100,000, which does make it one of the most expensive arcade machines ever produced. But it also has multiple games on it. I think it's 3 or 5 games on it, but they're the same type of games adapted for the smaller setting that are in the XD Dark Ride. And so if you want the value that the XD Dark Ride brings in a smaller package, more arcadified package, that's what Super Blaster and Cube, which is an enclosed version of the same concept, offers. So motion seats, wind effects, really high quality graphics, that sort of stuff. Princess Bride Pinball by P3 Multimorphic, which it was so dumb. I put this on my channel. I recorded it at Amusement or at Pinball Expo, and some company out of Italy who claims to own the rights to the Princess Bride dinged it for every moment that it showed a little clip of the Princess Bride in there, and so I had to cut those out, and it was so absurd because it's like, this doesn't allow you to watch the movie. I don't see how this violates fair use. It's absurd, but you can't argue with the algorithm, I guess, because they don't care. Is Typhoon the cheapest game from Triotech? I think at this point it is, because Triotech does have the Typhoon 10th anniversary edition with 4K screen, and those did exceptionally well. The whole Typhoon series. I know there's Storm VR that they do, and then they, of course, there's Super Blaster. But yeah, I guess from Triotech, yeah, that probably would be the cheapest one that they have, which is something like $25,000. The Uncanny X-Men, based upon Days of Future Past storyline from 1980, and fun game. Different with having the flippers offset a little bit, like 3 flippers on the bottom, with the 2 main ones that you're using over to the right, off center. And so footage of this one that I got to play at Pinball Expo. At least that was something I got to play at Pinball Expo, along with the Princess Bride. Of course, that when it comes to hard to find pinball machines, Princess Bride is going to be it. It's like, I'm pretty sure the only time I'll ever see that one is at an event like Pinball Expo. But X-Men, probably will find that at more places. Also, Princess Bride is something, $10,000, $12,000. Now, at least it comes with an upgrade kit, or it's if you have a P3 multimorphic cabinet, you can actually swap those out, kit them out for a much cheaper price. So like if you want to switch this over to Weird Al's Museum of Hilarity, then you can do that on the cheaper. And so it's the only pinball system that does that. But I know it's not everybody's cup of tea because most of the playfield is actually an LCD screen, and it's only at the very back where you have actual ramps and stuff like that to use. Thunder Attack from Leon Amusement Source International came out in March. This one actually would vend cards, and you would scan the card to power up, and it does not require you to scan in any sort of authorization card, so you can actually recycle the cards back into it, which is nice. The game itself, well, it's one of those games that's like, this could use a lot more polish on it. And graphically, it was all right, but it felt in some ways kind of like that Zombies Crisis game. And like the boss battle that I remember playing was just really, really long. And it's like you got to keep some of that stuff cut down to a shorter pace, so that way you're not boring the customers, like I might be doing here with our live stream. And then last but not least, for official releases was Toho Scarlet Diabolique Fantastica by Team Shanghai Alice and X Arcadia. Came out on April 1st, but it was no joke. It was a serious game. And this was the 8th, I think, from the Toho series, shoot 'em up series, if I'm understanding the numbering on those correctly. And while it hasn't been announced, I'm pretty sure they'll probably do number 9 at some point here soon. Now, whether or not this game would do well in the US or Europe, I have no idea. I'm pretty sure it does very well in Japan. But it's kind of one of those games where it seems like it's probably better for the Japanese audience. But if somebody in chat has played the Toho series, I can maybe attest to that, whether or not I'm accurate there. Now, there were some limited releases. As mentioned, NBA Superstars had a timed release for Dave & Buster's. Round 1 USA's gotten Space Invaders Gigamax. Naruto Emblem Battle by Marvelous. It's only available as a rental, which is really strange to me. I had a hard time getting a hold of somebody at Marvelous. I mean, fortunately, they did eventually respond, but it seemed kind of difficult to figure out where you would get a Naruto, and it sounds like they own the machine and you just get a split out of it, which in some ways might be okay, but in others, I'm sure there's operators who prefer to just own that outright. Ninja Escape by Turner Pinball came out in October, but it's only 100 units were produced for that one, and it sounded like that was permanent. I mean, there might be some more units of a different version made later. I mean, it was cool. It was an original design. Ninjas and stuff doesn't need a whole lot of explanation behind that one. And then we do have Taika no Tatsujin is, I mean, I guess technically we should put this up here as a regular release. Yes, I agree, System 11. I'm not a fan of it at all. Now, unfortunately, a lot of Japanese operators, it's just life. And that's one of the reasons why X Arcadia does well, is because they don't require a revenue share model at all. Like if you're going with Taito, with Nessica, or Sega with APM3, or Initial D, or Taika no Tatsujin, or any of the other rhythm games over there through Konami or Sega or whoever, you got to pay a revenue share, and it sucks because it's like that's eating out of your potential profits. Because running a business like this, it's not free. You know, sometimes I'll get people come in here like, "Oh, you make so much money." It's like, if I wanted to get rich quick, I would not be in this industry. You know, usually the way to get rich in this industry is to already be rich, you know, and then you open up a place like Dave & Buster's, and then you make more money from there. But it's like there's an FEC down the hall from me, multi-million-dollar location. I've been surviving against them, but like from what I understand, that guy, he made his millions on the stock market and in real estate, and after he had made his money there, he decided, I want to open up a chain of bowling alleys and arcades, and so that's what he does. And so it's like, okay, I wish that's maybe what I should have done, is been a real estate developer first and then got into arcades instead of that, because I'm going about it the wrong way. Oh yeah, System 11. From YouTube, he's mentioning how card updates on X Arcadia. This is something that I wish they could fix, because it's very inconvenient and somewhat nerve-wracking to have to send your cartridges in the mail, and I don't know where you guys have to send them in the UK. Maybe even Japan, which definitely would suck, and it's an extra cost and stuff. And so, fortunately for me, I'm able to usually get them updated at trade show events because they have them there. But there have been times where I've also had to send them in to get updated, and or like getting the firmware updated. I've had to send my X over to Japan before too, and so it's like it'd be nice if there could be an online system to do that and still keep the security in place. So, let's see, already released for Asia, you had Beatmania IIDX, is that how you're supposed to say it? 32 Pinky Crush came out on October 9th. Chunatham Luminous Plus and Verse by Sega came out on June 20th and December 12th. So I guess that'd be the first one. That's one thing with Japan, at least we get release dates on pretty much everything. Dance Dance Revolution World, that's right, that's the latest DDR by Konami, came out on June 12th. Iketsu Tyson Niten Soryu no Tatakai by Sega came out on September 18th. I don't remember reading much about that one. I kind of forgot that one exists. C-Max. Goldstorm Pirates did come out in Japan. Still not sure yet when it's coming out here in the States. I haven't heard anything from Bandai Namco since IAPA. I've been trying, but maybe I just need a call. But they do get the environmental version of this, whereas here in the States, again, for whatever reason, they're not doing the ceilings anymore. Maybe they earn better as open air ones. I know some operators do prefer not having a ceiling because, when they're like the Luigi's Mansion that I showed earlier, they become dens of iniquity. Gita Dora Galaxy Wave came out on March 13th from Konami. Initial D, the Arcade Season 4, April 4th. Hey, nice timing there. My Deluxe Buddies Plus and Deluxe Prism, March 21st and September 12th, respectively. Minecraft Dungeons Arcade Japan version, and it's also available in China, too. That came out on November 20th. Can't remember. I'm pretty sure there are some software differences with this, too. It's not just the localization that's changed. Mobile Suit Gundam Arsenal-based Unitribe by Bandai Namco came out on June 20th. May 4th again for Omen of Sorrow on X Arcadia. One Piece United Fight by Bandai Namco came out in late March, but it's only in China. Phantom Breaker Omnia, as mentioned. I guess all the X Arcadia games that came out in Japan also came out everywhere else in the world at the same time. So since we've already discussed those. Polaris Chord by Konami Amusements, March 27th. I remember hearing a lot about this. Has anybody played that one yet? But I remember hearing some hype about it. Poppin' Music, Jam and Fizz came out on September 25th. Shimen Sokas by Success came out on November 25th by Sega APM3. I don't remember much about this game, but looks like 4 players. Toho Scarlet Diabolique. Wing and Midnight Maximum Tune 6RR Plus, and this is something I still get on videos. Where's 6RR Plus in the United States? Well, I have a video about that. 6 is not coming to the States, at least from everything Namco's told me over the past while. It's not happening. And so the next version of Maximum Tune, whether that's 7 or 6RRRR Plus, 6R Plus, maybe they could call it. Whatever it is, whatever the 7 is supposed to be, at least, again, this is what I've been told before, is that 7 would get a worldwide release. That means Europe as well as North America. But I was also told that a few years ago, so things could have changed. Namco could always change their minds until they have an official release. But as Ted had found, I think he had shared this on Discord, or we talked about it in a News Bites, there was a patent that Namco filed, I think it was in Japan, for a motion-based system. Now, here's a little insider thing that isn't very well known, but Bandai Namco and Adrenaline Amusements did work together on NFS Heat Takedown, which also has a motion base. I don't know if that was just them patenting the motion base in Japan, or if it's maybe a completely different system. But either way, there is some research that Bandai Namco has been doing with motion-based seats. So it's seeming that it's not a guarantee, but it seems like they might actually do a motion version of Maximum Tune. Now, again, maybe they could just be doing that for a future release of a completely different racer or a Dead Heat Unleashed motion version. I don't know. But at least if you want 6RR Plus, it's everywhere except for North America and Europe, accepting imports. I'm not sure how many gray imports of that are out there. What's the latest version you guys have? I mean, I know the official latest version you guys have seen over in Europe would be 4, Maximum Tune 4. But has anybody imported like any of the 6s or the 5s over there? Let me know in chat. And then we had Yatagarusu Enter the Eastward by that dev team for Nessica Cross Live. I don't remember much about that game either. And then there were some limited releases. Genda, who does the Gigo locations, which is also growing here in the States. They've been making some moves. I think they bought part of the Namco Namco USA locations that had been out there. They're developing their own content as well as expanding their locations. And so yeah, that covers Asia. With Europe, I think it was just stuff that I mentioned at the beginning, whereas like Super Drill by Ace Amusement and Wave Riders Extreme would be stuff that only was released there in Europe. For some Redemption games, like we already mentioned Bobblehead Baseball Versus, but there are some games which are only Redemption, like there's no amusement only mode as far as I'm aware on them, like Dragon's Bane by LAI Games, which is basically a coin pusher with video elements on it. Goats and Ropes by Baytech Entertainment, which has the giant version that's 5 stories tall, and then they released a single screen version at IAPA 2024. The first giant version came out in February. It's just 2 screens. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but Lane Master Extreme, already mentioned that one. Ranku Rampage, which actually I guess we should put it up at the top there. I need to go back and fix this page afterwards. That came out in January, but that also does have a non-ticket mode. Surf League, Zombies Ready Daddy Go by Sega. I mean, this is a fun game. I don't know if anybody's played this yet, but it's fun because you roll the balls. It's like a roller derby game, but it has the video screen and it's zombies instead of horses. And I know those roller derby games with the actual mechanical horses are pretty popular over in the UK. I don't see them too often here in the States, but from what I hear, they're show up in the UK a bit. And then Zombie Rolling, which is an alley bowler game from Amusement Source International that came out in July. I saw that at IAPA as well. So that covers all of those releases. I guess the only thing left for us to chat about is our arcade locations. Unless anybody else in chat has something you guys want to discuss. I don't know if we want to discuss any 2025 stuff. I mean, there's not a whole lot I can talk about other than what we saw at IAPA already. X Arcadia showed off a lot of stuff, including Eartheon, Exalabel, which was one of my favorites to play at the show. Even though it's very early, it was still a lot of fun to play. I liked playing Jam Jam and Jelly Exa. Let's see, there was the fighting games, Chaos Code 2, Vanguard Princess R, Asuka 120% excellent. Air Gallet Exalabel was fun. If you're into Air Gallet, I'd never played it before until I played it on the Exa. But if you're into, I guess, kind of Raiden-like games, that fits. As mentioned very early on in the stream, don't know how many people are here from the beginning of the stream at this point, but we had the 6 different location watch posts and covering a lot of different venues. And again, if anybody has knowledge about a venue that we haven't covered on the site, please let us know. We'll get that into the next location watch. I know when I post, almost every time I post about them now, somebody on social media says, hey, you missed such and such place. It's like, oops. So I'll have to add some in there. But always happy to cover some of these. Don't do as much as I used to try and find out all the games and list a bunch of them out, but I don't know if there's much point in doing that at this point. Just mainly pointing out what the venues might do, any major games that they have. And we've seen a lot of these pinball parlors or venues that are focused more on pinball than other stuff. I am curious how they're doing, and maybe it's where they're serving food and drink that they're doing all right. Also to help save on our server space, we don't have pictures of each one. And sometimes there are venues where I can't find any good pictures at all either. And so, yeah, that's one place. But no, it's not just North America where we cover releases. It's Europe, it's Middle East, it's Asia, Oceania. Is that how you say it? I mean, there's been action going on all over the world, and in some surprising places. Like here in January, this is the only time I think I've ever mentioned a location opening in Iraq before, and so that's always interesting to hear about locations opening up in places where maybe we almost never hear about them. Of course, in the States, there's oftentimes just more arcades always opening in like California, or I see New Jersey pop up fairly frequently. Quite a few were in California there in March. In Georgia, I do see that one pop up every now and then. There was one from New York there. Yume World in Durham, UK, or Arcade Warehouse number 4 in Doncaster, UK. And so one of these days when I get over to the UK, I'm definitely going to have to set aside a day or two to just go on a tour and go visit all the different arcades around the country. Or, of course, I'll probably need more than a couple of days to do that properly. Oh yeah, Greece, but that's one we don't hear about too often. But there are certain areas of the world where when they do pop up, like in Greece, you tend to see a lot of Chinese games, and that makes sense because I know when I used to sell arcade machines, just customs or importation taxes, like one country that I can never really sell into, even though I used to live there, I could speak Portuguese fluently. Brazil, I could never sell stuff into Brazil because it was just an astronomical cost after you had to go through everything, and that made it very, very difficult to sell stuff in there. And so when you would see bootlegs and stuff, or cheap Chinese games, it made sense because it's like that's all they could really afford, because you buy what should be a $10,000 game in the U.S. ends up being like $40,000 US, and the money in that country, it can be like you feel like even more than that sometimes. So it just sucks that that's how it shakes out at times. Time Zone, we saw a lot of growth from Time Zone throughout the year, all over like the Philippines, India, other parts of Micronesia. Yes. So that was March. In June, at the beginning of summer, F1 Arcade, although it doesn't have any arcade games like what we've been talking about here the whole time. Oh yeah, Ted brings up on the YouTube chat that there are a couple of games that are on tests that we'll probably see more of in 2025, including a new VR game from Triotech, which who knows, maybe that'll be their cheaper game. Contra Burst by Konami, which has been on tests or been available at certain Round 1 USA locations. Like if Konami does set up a new US division and they start selling games, it's very possible that Contra Burst could become more available. Or Ted had mentioned very early on that we'll have to keep an eye out for that next week or the week after when EAG happens at Electrocoin, since they have a relationship with Konami still. That you could get that game officially over there first, or at least widespread. I mean, this arcade looks cool. I like how they have that set up. Leaderboard Arcade, that's a nice name. Of course, that's one thing. It's sometimes when there are arcades that use a name that everybody seems to use, like Fun Zone Arcade or One Up Arcade and stuff, or using that when their name Level Up. It's like, how many times have I seen that term used in an arcade? It becomes a little confusing. Or if it's a generic one like Fun Zone, you put that into a search, and it's sometimes hard to get the exact one you're trying to find because there's so many things that call themselves. Or sometimes you can have, like, say, a movie theater that just calls we have the Fun Zone here, and so it doesn't work for SEO, man. Smash Arcade in Brussels, Belgium, and that's been some nice stuff too. Seeing some growth in some places in Europe that aren't like UK, where you may not see a lot of games a lot of the time, or a lot of new arcades. Sorry, I think we had a story about one in Germany not super long ago, but Yeah. And here's a place over in Japan that had the new Arc 32 game cabinets from X Arcade. I guess that's something we probably should have put on the Arcade 2024 release list, or I'll put on there when we go back to it. See, that was June that we just covered. In August, yeah, here was when I got to share. Like, rarely I've been able to go and visit a grand opening of a new arcade because I'm in Utah. There's not a ton that they're opening here all the time. But then, there are a few. I mean, I can think of a few other arcades that I can drive to in under an hour, and this was one of them. Opening in Clinton, Utah, which is north of me about 45 minutes. It wasn't super far away from where I had my second location in Ogden. But this Fat Cats, they had invited me to come and check out their FEC and stuff, and so it was nice to get a look at that on the opening day, and it was very, very busy. And that's also where I got to do some more footage of Airstrike, and there's Big Shot in the background there while I played that too. Arcade Monsters, this was a surprise one because they're a big arcade in Orlando in Florida. But they decided to open one on the other side of the country. And it's like I had a hard enough time managing an arcade that was a second arcade that was 40 minutes away from me. I can't imagine. I mean, I guess you just have to hire the right people and put your trust in them, because it's not going to be possible for you to go and visit another, the other side of the country every day. Unless you're Elon Musk, I guess. Eastwood, Los Angeles, and one in Ohio, Pinball Planet in Ohio. Oh, Arkansas, I don't see too many opening over there. Florida, yeah, Florida's another state where we see a lot of arcade openings taking place. And in the UK, some more there. I'm glad that those in the UK watching this will have to let me know. It sounds like electricity prices have gotten better from where they were, because I remember for a while it sounded pretty dire there, like with the prices skyrocketing so badly to a point where it's like I don't know how anybody can survive at prices like that. But I don't know if it's improved. It seems like it has, but I could be wrong. I just haven't heard anybody mentioning that in a while. Oh yeah, a new arcade in Seoul, South Korea, that is focused, I guess, entirely on Taiko no Tatsuji. So that's cool, especially if you're a Taiko fan. And then, let's see, I'm going to do Juizi, Connecticut. That's not a place we see too often. Another fun spot, Pixel Palace Arcade and Bar, Time Rift Arcade. I guess this is a big YouTuber, the 8-Bit guy, that is part of that partnership or something. Off-World Arcade. Fun Unlimited Arcade. Funny enough, this arcade, I had found out about this when I was doing something up in Ogden, and this was actually at the location where I'd had my second arcade. Now, not this specific spot, but this picture you see here, it used to be a game store. When I had my arcade up there, they were just selling video games all the way from the Atari up to the PS5. And so they even still have the shelves in there from that. But after I left, apparently they moved their game store over to where I had my arcade, and they opened this arcade in this store instead. Felt a bit cramped and kind of didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because it's like I had all this arcade stuff, like even the floor said arcade. And so they moved it over here instead. And I also think my ceilings were higher, so it's like you can see here on the Space Invaders Frenzy, they had to take the marquee off because it couldn't fit. But they had like a Halo Fireteam Raven and a Dark Escape 4D in there, and so just interesting stuff. But it kind of just felt like, hey, we got this space to throw some arcade games in there. Yume Arcade in Ontario, Canada. We do see that once in a while. NQ64, that seems like one that's expanding pretty well over in the UK as well. I don't know how many locations they have at this point. Germany, we don't hear about a lot of those in Germany, because I know Germany's had a lot of laws and regulations and fees that prevent a lot of arcade growth over there over the years, but maybe they've loosened the restrictions. The Czech Republic, that's also one place we don't hear about very often either. Arcade growth in Japan, that's always good. Vietnam, a time zone over in Vietnam. also would be one I don't hear about too often. Then last but not least, we had December, or I think I mentioned this before earlier. We had some new arcade finders such as Insert Coin App and Retro Arcade Hunter, but also like Arcade PvP Arena. The surprising thing about this is just I haven't heard about many VR arcades opening up at all. Like I think this is the only one in the entire year, actually. And so, kind of a surprise that we see that. So it sounds like they're doing well so far. But it does like there used to be a VR arcade that I had as a neighbor here, and he closed down like the month before the pandemic hit. But he was saying it's because his Christmas in 2019 was terrible. He just wasn't seeing good business, and whereas for me it was like the best. I think December 2019 was like the best month I have ever had in my whole arcade history. And so I was a little surprised when I saw him packing up and closing up shop. I was like, how did you fail? I thought, VR is the hot thing, but not really. But I think it's because you need something exclusive. If you're just offering what's at home but curated, it's just not that appealing to people, I would think. Let's see. Shit. I mean, some stuff in Canada, Seattle, Washington, Salem, New Hampshire, and Colorado. And this almost looks like the pinball XP. Of course, I see a lot of pinball places doing stuff like this, setting up the monitors above the playfields. I've thought about maybe doing that. This place said it had a cyberpunk look to it, but I don't know. At least from this picture that I saw, it's like I don't know that looks exactly cyberpunk, but maybe it's like the LEDs change colors or something to cyberpunk style schemes. Castlecade, a new one. People in Wisconsin. This is growing. I've mentioned this operator before. He runs this Castlecade, but he also does other routes and stuff. And so he's one that I talk to a lot about how pinball does. And he's told me that he's had some pinballs in bars where it's like they do okay, but they don't really do any better than I see them doing at other venues. And so it's not necessarily a guarantee that alcohol equals profits on pinball machines. Let's see. Gravity Arcade opening up there, and Lucky Claw for, hey, at least it has a Taika no Tatsujin. It's not just those things. Always nice to see a Darius Burst on location, and hey, even a Star Wars Battle Pod. But I still have my Darius Burst here, but not making as much as it used to. Level Up in France. Of course, that's another name where it's like it's hard to find unless you tie it to the location, because how many places call themselves Level Up? I know we saw one earlier. This is interesting, seeing this diner here in Japan, but I guess they also have some arcade machines. So they're in Japan. Yeah, so that's Location Watch. We'll be doing another one here soon. But I guess that kind of wraps up 2024. So overall, it was a somewhat uneven year. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did have some tough business throughout most of the year up until the very end. And so, I'm hopeful. I don't know how 2025 is going to shake out, but I'm hopeful that things will be good going into this new year. So far they seem to be fine. Even today, I started off busy. Now it's dead. Now it feels like what I was expecting was going to be throughout the day. But we do have some more games. It's like all these games that I just talked about. They're going to be out there trickling into locations. Yes, it's true. Not every single game is going to be available at the venue, but it's like if you do have a venue that has where you want them to get certain games, let them know about it. That doesn't mean that they'll get it, because it has to make an economic sense for them. If you're going to be the only person that's going to go in and play Toho Perfect, then that's probably not going to be sustainable for them, and it's not going to show up on their sheet. But if enough people were to go and play a certain game, then yeah, it could. But so far we've only had one game be released, Dungeons and Dragons: The Eye of the Tyrant. I know actually the Avian Nights game by Alan One, which is kind of like a new age joust. That is actually shipping now, but I've just been waiting on some official materials to be able to share that story. So I guess that would count as two games. Alan One is also going to be holding a world championship on Avian Nights here in a couple of weeks, and I'm see if I can find some time to get out there and do that. It's about a 40-minute drive, but they're flying in some people from around the country that were the best players on that one on the console version, and going to be doing that. But I believe there's going to be an announcement for a new game or two at that event. So interesting to see that. Let's see, a lot of this stuff is just TBA as to what's coming out this year. But I've been able to talk to a few people where they say Q1. They seems to imply, either this month or next month is when they'll be getting it out, such as the Warlords remake and the Food Fight Frenzy game by Retro Arcade Remakes. We're not at IAPA. There might be some of these like the Unis games like Dino Storm and Neon Rush, which might have already started shipping, and so need to put them back on 2024. Perfect Pour by DSM Arcade. We've done a story on this one. This one's available to order already. There's actually a couple of bars out there in Iowa that have it, and they've been reporting really, really good numbers on that one. This is essentially the concept that Baytech borrowed for Icy Slush Rush. The Icy Slush Rush isn't coming out until April, but like the officially Perfect Pour will begin shipping in February. But there will be some news on this one at some point soon, because it's not the only version of the game that's going to be out there. That's all I can say for now. Let's see, Alpha Ops VR Strike by Sega is actually looking like April, May at this point. I should be finding out about Angry Birds Fury Road here next week. So I've been talking to somebody about that who initially tipped me as to the game and sent me some information. Not sure if it'll change much from what we saw at IAPA or not, but still, Angry Birds Racing will be here soon. Then otherwise, a lot of TBA stuff. As I mentioned, X Arcadia will have some cool stuff. It should have some cool stuff at Amusement Expo. There's one game that I know everybody that's still watching or has watched the stream will know off the top of their heads, and I really like what it sounds like they're going to be doing with this. It's going to be something a little bit different with the IP. So I'm really excited to see that. I really hope that it actually comes there. And so, fingers crossed, we'll see. Super Drill, that's also supposed to start shipping this week. I need to get a hold of Corey at Amusement Source International, ask him about that and maybe any other games that they might be grabbing from Amusement Source, from Ace Amusement. But yeah, that pretty much ends it. Thank you for sticking with me for these past 3 hours. Really appreciate everybody's support of the site and sending in tips and joining us on Discord. As mentioned, we've mentioned many times, we do have a Discord channel, Arcade Heroes. Also, I do have a LinkedIn page. I was going to be streaming this to the Arcade Heroes LinkedIn page, but it won't let me do it until we have 100 followers there. So I'll have to put that link maybe in, over in Discord, I guess. Or maybe I can, let me see if I can find that link here before we close things up. But yeah, if anybody got any other questions, anything else you want to cover before I do that, before we close our session here. Speak now, forever hold thy peace. Make sure this is the correct link before I share it in chat. I guess that should work. But you need a LinkedIn profile to see it. So, oh yeah, I guess with that NSFW up there, I haven't heard anything about Hot Pink, the X Arcadia variation.
Welcome to Prime Time Amusements, your amusement rental company for South Florida and...
Oops, that was just a tab that was open on another browser as I was trying to check on something. Sorry. So I don't know if anything's going on with Hot Pink anymore or not, or how many of them got out there. Of course, it's not something that a normal location is going to be able to have, because very triple X or at least double X on some stuff. But yeah, cool. yeah, I think that covered 2024. But also, if anybody has any ideas for other live streams, I'll have to see about doing that one of these days. But hopefully, the StreamYard one worked out. I like how it was able to stream to X. I don't know if we had anybody watching from X at all, but I know we did have some on LinkedIn. As far as I know, Hot Pink did release the Badass Babes and Rumble Storm, I think it was. I'm not sure if they ever released the Shakuga Excommunication, where it was basically Splatterhouse with nudity and even more violence. I was kind of surprised by how graphic that game was. It's like maybe that's why they didn't, because it was. It's like, wow, a location definitely would have to have no qualms whatsoever about certain things, because I mean there was some very, very graphic stuff. I mean, maybe Street Fighter V did, but I don't know. It's hard to say just because like I didn't see much distribution stuff on that, and the only time I ever saw one in person was at a trade show off the floor. Like I went to X Arcadia's hotel, and that's where they had one there, and I got to see it. And I think I shared photos on X back when it was Twitter about that one. But yeah, I just haven't heard anything about it. Last time I checked their website, it didn't really have anything like distributors where you could buy it. But yeah, I mean, they did tell me that there was a chain of strip clubs, I think by Larry Flint, like a famous, or the Hustler strip clubs wanted to get one for all their locations and stuff. And it's like, I know there's strip clubs in most countries around the planet, and so it's like I'm sure it would work there. It's just yeah, I'm not sure where you exactly would put that. But yeah, again, I haven't heard anything about them on that. But yeah, overall, we still have plenty of cool stuff to look forward to. I mean, EXA obviously has most of the list packed up there. What will Raw Thrills show this year? I'm not sure. I mean, I did get to visit Raw Thrills' HQ back at Pinball Expo when I was there in Chicago. I saw something that Andy Eloff said was a new game, but they wouldn't let me see it. And to me, it looked like they had reconfigured a Godzilla, and it had the Godzilla guns on it. So that's all I could really see. But it was pointed at the screen as opposed to away from the screen. So it looked like it might have been. I don't know if that meant a non-VR version of Godzilla, which personally I would really like that. Because I'm not really interested in buying the VR version of the game. I mean, I've heard it sounded amazingly well, but I'm just not crazy about anything that's above $25,000, really, much less $40,000 and such. But so maybe it's a new light gun game. But Raw Thrills has done some surprising things like NBA Superstars. Nobody really expected that. I know they had Tecmo Bowl in development back in 2020 and 2021, 2022. That also had Tim Kitzrow, who does the voices on NBA Jam, NBA Superstars. But I guess it just didn't work out. And I think I saw like in Raw Thrills' graveyard, they had Tecmo Bowl sitting in the back somewhere collecting dust. But that was a fascinating walkthrough. I wish I could have filmed it, but obviously couldn't. But yeah, we got that. Bandai Namco, I mean, I'm not sure that there's anything new that they're going to be looking at for a while until maybe the end of the year. Bike Dash Delivery, I don't know if that's tested well enough to, yeah, that sounds right. Tecmo Bowl walk, so NBA Superstars could run. Yeah, I mean, maybe we could see something else from Bandai Namco. I mean, maybe that's when Maximum Tune 7 or whatever it's going to be comes out at the end of the year. Maybe Bike Dash Delivery. I mean, I'm sure there'll be something else that Namco will show in Japan over that time. It'll be very interesting to see what Sega Japan does with My DX, but also, how that will work out with Sega Amusements International, because they're technically two separate companies. But also, what else will Sega have? They're obviously working on new stuff behind the scenes, but we'll probably see that later in the year. I mean, who knows? Maybe they could have a surprise at Amusement Expo, but this last Amusement Expo they didn't. have anything that new as I would be expecting Alpha Strike VR Ops, like the final version. They said the version at IAPA was 70% done, so I'd expect the 99% version or 100% version to be at Amusement Expo. Maybe Adrenaline Amusements might have something too. I remember Jeff at AA saying that they had some other stuff, but just for IAPA, the only thing they had ready was the Duck Derby thing, which is kind of an arcade game, but is more a theme park sort of thing, which was very surprising to see them do that. I mean, Eunice will obviously have a bunch of stuff. They're always releasing a bunch of stuff. What am I thinking? Oh yeah, LAI Games is supposed to have some sort of like Replay Magazine called it mixed reality, but when I talked with an LAI rep at IAPA and I was asking them about it, they said, well, it's not accurate to really call it mixed reality. It's more VR, but it sounded like it might be a shooter game. But it's supposed to be something different about how they're doing it. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I've really been expecting people to, or more of these companies to have their own response to Godzilla, because Godzilla's been posting such amazing numbers. It's like, just like with Virtual Rabbids, when Virtual Rabbids came out, then everybody started developing their own VR rides, like King Kong from Raw Thrills and Storm VR from Trio Tech, and I guess Bandai Namco didn't really do anything there, and Sega didn't do a ride, so to speak, but they still had their own VR things. I've been expecting to see more stuff that's like Godzilla, where it's, it's a VR, like a mounted shooter game. Yeah, that's what I would expect at this point, other than the things that I have been told about. And so just wait and see. But again, thank you guys so much. Over 3 hours. Wow. My voice is killing me, so I'll have to not say anything for the rest of the day so I don't lose my voice completely. But thank you so much, you guys. Keep the spirit of the arcades alive out there, and we'll catch you on the next video, whenever that is and whatever that is.